And the enemy is saying, look, man, we right up on the coast. We right there in Georgia, man. You know, damn nuclear summer for you. And they was off the coast of Miami and Russia just invading all in. All up in American states. Then remember, Trump told Biden, man, you just let Russia take land from America. He's talking about Ukraine. And Trump said, that would have never happened if I was in the office. He would have never took Ukraine. The man said basically Russia took, the man just took, they took Ukraine. They checked and took Ukraine. He basically was calling him by himself.
You saw.
Right? This nigga scared. They sound like the typical street nigga now.
Right.
The man told Biden, he told him, you had sex with the prostitute.
Right.
You had sex porn star while your wife was pregnant.
Right.
Having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant. I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
You was with a hoe.
You was with a hoe.
I got hoes in different area codes. Area codes.
Well, unto us, you give me Acts 1:6.
And then Biden,
how the kingdom got to come in?
And then Biden called Trump a sucker. I said, you a sucker.
You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Yeah.
Nigga, that's why your son got caught with a burner and some crack.
Yeah, the most high master of mockery.
And I think he's asking something back. I think Biden is up there.
Right.
I ran got about 200 cops up there.
Right.
I asked the civil and I cop, he said, I think Biden is here. Because he went from the debate to Raleigh. He went to the Waffle House in Raleigh, and then he was going to come up here. Read what you got, King. The book of Isaiah. Get your own ass out. Right, Reed?
You're going to stumble over.
Get your own ass out here, boy.
Stumble over here.
Talk to you about Trump.
Isaiah 9 and verse 6.
Yeah,
A child is born.
yeah, our kingdom gotta come, man.
Right.
This place is gone, man. This place is gone, man. Read.
Unto us a son is given.
Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. Good.
And the government shall be upon his shoulder.
The government is going to be on your Howard Shine's shoulder.
Right.
You can't have no government on money. It sounds like two dudes on the corner, man.
Right.
They sound worse than Jake.
Right.
People, at least when Jake argue with each other, Jake used little fly slang.
Right.
Nigga, what? Nigga, what? Nigga, you can't see me. Facts. Nigga, what?
Right.
You're a sucker.
You're the sucker. You're the loser.
You're a sucker, prostitute. You're slept with a porn star while your wife was pregnant. Right? No, he saw the new nigga on the
Yeah, the new nigga.
He saw the new. He's beefing with each other like
Right.
the new nigga on the corner.
God.
This place is gone, man. We need the government of your Howard Shine.
Try to-
Right? Come on.
Trying to be like Kendrick and Jake.
Any of you niggas, that's why Biden went to the Waffle House down in Raleigh and you
Right.
niggas smiled and cheesed up in his face. You are done, man.
Right.
Hey, you. What's up, brother? You won the championship? Right? The championship is in your Howard Shine, brother.
Right.
The government shall be upon his shoulder.
Yeah.
Right, read on.
The government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor.
That's what I wanted. The government shall be upon your Howard Shine shoulder.
Right.
They cannot be on Biden or Trump, man. Right. Them niggas is two street thugs arguing on the block, man.
Right.
That debate was the block, man.
Mhm.
That was Esau's block, and they was having a nigga. Them niggas got beef with each other.
Right.
Read Acts 1:6. God's book of Acts, the 1:6. Our kingdom gotta come, man. Read.
Right.
When their four were coming together, they asked him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time, God, restore again the kingdom of Israel? If you restore again the kingdom unto Israel, God, and he said unto them, it is not for you to know this time. Even the disciples back then, man, during the time of the Romans, Like we asking the Most High now,
Right.
are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel soon, Lord?
Right.
We humbly asking him. We're not putting the Most High on a time frame or rushing him, but we like, if this what we got to look forward to as leadership,
Right.
Lord, you know, I would shine and raise up the 144,000 and bring the kingdom and the true government back soon. Right, come on.
And he said unto them, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons.
The Lord said it's not for you to know the times or the seasons, but look at the signs. With the type of leadership that's set up now, with the type of leadership that's set up now, we gotta know that the kingdom is coming soon.
Right.
Right, come on.
Which the Father had put in his own power.
What the Lord say?
That the Father, which the Father had put in his own power.
In other words, he was saying we don't know the exact time Yahweh shall coming back.
Right.
But he said, look for the signs. We know the time is near. Right, come on.
But he shall receive power.
You're going to receive power, God.
After that, the Holy Ghost is come upon you.
The Holy Spirit was going to come on the disciples back then and the teachers in this last day and age.
God, and ye shall be witnesses unto me.
See that? So he told the disciples, you're going to have to be witnesses unto me. God,
both in Jerusalem,
God,
and in Judea,
come on,
and in Samaria,
God,
and unto the uttermost parts of the earth.
you're going to have to preach the gospel all over the world. So that's why Yahweh Shai said, he that endured to the end, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world. Matthew 24:13-14. All right, so that was the what he was saying right here. But he said, the disciples said, are you going to, at this time, give me 2 Ezra 7 and 10. At this time, restore the kingdom unto Israel? Lord, at this time, you got a guy that's so old and senile and destroyed. They calling for the black, they calling for Michelle Obama.
Right.
They skipped over Kamala.
Yeah, they said the hell with you.
They said the hell with Kamala.
Right.
Kamala, go somewhere with Fat Joe and
Yeah.
do the Dougie and dance to some damn hip hop.
Right.
Yo, go get Michelle.
Right.
We'll take anything but this old senile nigga.
Right.
This nigga is finished, man.
There was one part where he looked off to the side. He like he was sleeping with his eyes open. He just froze up.
It was one time the man looked like a demon,
Right.
a zombie, a rat, and a snake all in one.
Right. God.
I don't care if you think I'm Satan reincarnated.
All in one, man. And that Biden, that's a scary ass looking devil, man.
Right.
I mean, when you got the spirit of Yahweh, you can look him in the eye.
Right.
But if you ain't in the spirit, that devil looks scary as hell.
Right.
His eyes and the man just look like he's gonna drop dead, man.
Right. Right.
Oh yeah, he's sexual porn star.
Having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant.
The Most High is the master of mockery.
God.
The Most High power, Yahweh,
Ba'ashima Mashiach
is
Yahweh
the
Shai.
master of mockery.
God.
Ba'ashima Mashiach.
Yeah, sure.
Read, King. Who's reading? Yeah, read. 2 Ezra 7 and 10. Read.
The book of 2 Ezra, chapter 7 and verse 10. Bring it out. And I said, it is so, Lord. Then said he unto me, even so also is Israel's portion.
Give us, Lord, we humbly ask you.
Right.
Give us our portion, Lord.
Right.
Because this kingdom is done, man.
Right.
Read.
Because for their sakes I made the world.
For what?
For their sakes I made the
He
world.
said Israel's portion because I made the world for them.
Right.
Like these clowns that you see running around this damn 10-ring circus,
Right.
that's because we disobeyed the commandments, right? The Lord said, I'm going to put no people over you, man. These people are nothing,
Right.
right? How you going to be president and you're a convicted felon? The man said, my case is on appeal. But finish, man. It is done. And that's the Lord doing that, man. Right. The master of mockery of your kingdom. Right. So what do we bring all that out for? You love to say, oh, all you guys do is stand in the corner and talk about the white man. Because you Negroes can't take your head up out of his damn behind.
Right.
Now that's why. Because we're showing you, if you still want to trust in this man after the complete mockery that the Lord is making of him, then your ass need to die with him.
Right. Right.
Straight up. Give me Ecclesiastes 4:13. Right in the Bible. Ecclesiastes 4:13. You need to die with him, man. And you give me St. Mark 3 and 22. Let's get the classics, man. Right? Because what? This society, the scriptures, our elders and leaders was telling us about this stuff years ago, man. And we had to have faith and believe in it and understand that these things are going to come to pass. Right? Who you voting for?
Who are you voting for?
I don't know. You don't know? You saw the debate?
I didn't.
You didn't? Go watch it, man, and come back and tell us what you think of it. Huh? Just go check it out.
I'll check it out.
Right? And come back and let us know what you think. I read.
It's the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 13. Good. Better is the poor and the wise child.
The Lord said, better is the poor and the wise child. We're spiritually the poor and the wise children. This is not our kingdom. He still got all the riches, all the technology. You talking about, oh, Jay-Z's the first billionaire rapper, so what?
Right.
Jay-Z has compromised, man.
Right.
His ass gonna be just like Diddy real soon.
Right.
All his dirty little secrets gonna come out.
Right. That's why
He's bragging he's a billionaire.
That's why he's hiding.
Right. They said, there's 2 million African American millionaires in America. So what? What are they really doing for their people?
Right.
And most of them are probably compromised.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, don't say it about them. They just work hard for their money. Okay, that may be the case, but their money cannot save their nation.
Right.
That's just some rich niggas.
Right.
Like Chris Rock said, they're not even wealthy. They rich.
Right.
White people are wealthy.
They up in that
Niggas are rich.
Salakia. They up in that the gate. The building is gay. They got the light over the building is gay.
Yeah.
They made the building gay.
They broke the building.
You can imagine what's going on that.
Yeah, for Pride Month.
Yeah.
And Biden is down there somewhere.
Yeah, he up in the building.
I got up at A5. I saw all the cops. And Simeon said that he said, I think Biden is here.
Right.
Because they had the whole thing locked down. So Biden's over there somewhere.
You can imagine what they doing.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 13. That's the poor and the wise child.
It's better to be the poor and the wise child, good,
Than an old and foolish king.
and a what?
Than an old and foolish king.
And Biden is this is literally Biden right here.
God.
Old and a foolish damn king.
Right.
At least Trump still got a little bit, he still got his wits.
Right. Right.
Trump is slick with his damn tongue.
Right.
He said, this man is ridiculous. he ran this country into the ground.
Right.
Right? He ran this country into the ground. This man is ridiculous.
Right.
He did nothing. He did nothing for the people.
Right.
You know, who will go war, beat, and punish? Who will go war, beat, and punish? Listen, man, we're gonna rebuke Esau to a certain degree, and that's it. He's no longer gonna be a punishment. Right? Come on.
Go out of prison. He coming to reign.
And the Lord allowed them to come out of the caves of Europe to rule over the earth.
Right.
They was banished on all fours like dogs. Hairy, mangy, damn smelly dogs.
Right.
Right, come on.
For as also he that is born in his kingdom,
He that is born in his kingdom, God,
cometh forth.
coming poor, man. And right now, a lot of them are spiritually poor. They may still have the riches and the power, but they're spiritually poor. That was a poor representation of leadership last night.
Right.
The men resorted to petty insults, man.
Right.
It's the truth.
Right.
That's for the whole white wife.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You convicted on 34 counts,
Right.
right? So now the Lord is doing that to show you the folly of America, man.
Right.
The folly of this society. Right? And that's why the white man is crying and saying, I own a painting company and I still can't survive and make it in America. I still can't afford my bills.
Right.
That's why the white couple in West Virginia, they had 5 black children as slaves.
Come.
Because Esau wanna go back to that.
Right.
They want them good old days, man. They got that show In the Heat of the Night.
Mm-hmm.
They had an episode where there was a racist sheriff, and he was telling Bill Gillespie, he was saying, we need to go back. These niggas got too much freedom now.
Right.
A lot of the Edomites are just depressed over that.
Right.
Right? They just depressed over that. He said, we gave them too much freedom.
Right.
So now, to satisfy Esau's desire to still see niggas in a subjective manner, he adopts black children and put them in slave conditions.
Right.
He literally had them in a slave shack in 2024.
And that happens more often than this report.
Yeah, that's nothing. That just came out.
Yeah.
That just came out. Yeah, God. Right, that just came out. That happens all the time.
Right.
Remember the brother did the documentary like 5-10 years ago, where he went down to Georgia and Alabama and found slave quarters and dwellings back in 2009, 2010.
Oh.
They found in like 2016, 2017, they found people living in Mississippi in their shanty towns and shacks.
Just damage the whole city and the community. You know, right now, where are we? We're going backwards instead of forward because this country was built in error with the wrong principle, the wrong mindset of dealing with the people that are here.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that how long we been out of captivity, or are we out of captivity?
64 was a big year. It's gotten better since, hasn't it?
No, it hasn't.
How so?
From back in 64, it has gotten worse.
How so?
It has gotten worse. It has gotten worse. The people have gotten worse. Their mindset is worse.
Americans as a whole, or what? What do you mean by that?
Well, Americans as a whole. And then we distance ourselves and create social groups and stuff like that.
You want help from the feds, from the state?
I don't even think that they can do anything. They can't. I mean, if you really want to know the truth, the government is the reason that this neighborhood and all our neighborhoods are in the condition that they are in.
Okay, why are they to blame?
When our people in the 60s, they did excellent. We are people of the light. Do you understand that? We're not people of darkness. All of what you see now is darkness.
You remember it back then? You were there. Wow.
Yeah, I was.
How was that?
What I'm trying to tell you is back during that time, see, our people was attacked and we was assaulted. They killed off all the leaders and they were terrorists in the story. And our people been terrorized here ever since we got off the ship. That's part of the curse.
The curse.
The curse of our people.
All right. Shalom, shalom, shalom. God, all praise.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Salakia.
Shabbat.
Week, you know. So we're gonna get started because it's gonna be a lot of information, right? And you know, the last video is about an hour. I'm going to condense it as much as possible, but it has a lot of good information. I definitely don't want to leave that out. If I do leave some of it out, I definitely recommend you go check out the rest of it after this class, or you know, as soon as possible, okay? Because if it's something you didn't know about, it's definitely something you should know about. And if you did hear about it, watch this documentary because it has a lot of good information and stuff you might not have heard. Okay, so this class is called Agenda, right? And Warfare. We're going to Esau's agendas. It's a lot. So this class is gonna have to be broken down probably multiple times. It's the second one. Before we talked about the family, now we're talking about warfare. Okay, and a lot of warfare, of course, is physical, but you know, now it's more psychological, spiritual, chemical. A lot of chemical warfare going on in this world. Okay. Yatai, are you able to read?
Go on that one.
Khan. Okay, so we're going to start with Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 2. And we're going to get right into it. the videos, Fair Use Act, these videos are protected by Fair Use Act. They're actually all on YouTube, so I don't see how anybody can, you know what I mean? Say that it's not public information, public knowledge, but once again, this is a class, so they're protected by the Fair Use Act. All right. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 2. You got to bring it out.
Khan, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 12, and verse 2. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
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 Khan, verse 2. A good man obtaineth favor of the Lord, but a man of wicked devices will he condemn.
So we're dealing with men of wicked devices, and as you see, they're extremely wicked. They've learned from other captivities, other nations, how to further oppress people. So America is at, you know, I don't want to say 100%, but they are up there. Hopefully it's 100%. Hopefully you ain't got no more other wicked devices, but we all know captivity. They have the FEMA camps and things of that nature, you know, so they got a lot more, you know what I'm saying? But as far as their psychological warfare and their chemical warfare, they have surpassed the most wicked. I mean, they are the most wicked, so you can't surpass it. Remember, Esau is the border of wickedness. You can't go past that. All right, let's go to Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 10. While I queue up the next. So I can queue up the video. Which is really unbelievable. Unbelievable, but believable, if that makes any sense. All right. I'm sure you have all heard about let me get out of here. I'm sure you all have heard about MK Ultra. Okay. And MK Ultra is not done. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, oh, there's no more MK Ultra. We're good. No. Well, the thing about Esau is he really sticks to his guns, literally, but he sticks to a similar script all the time. If you look in the past of what they've done, they usually keep on that same modus operandi, you know, that same MO. I read a book, and I definitely recommend this. It's called The FBI's War on Tupac and Other Black Leaders. Let me see if I can get that. So we are understandably understood. On with Tupac, they tried to kill him about 5 times before they actually got him. You know, Tupac was somebody that, of course, once you know, he was getting into the political mind state, right? He that was his plan all along was bringing people together, right? And it was only a matter of time. Let me share my screen. It was only a matter of time before he would start saying, okay, don't vote for this person, vote for that person, right? So here it is. The FBI's war on Tupac Shakur and other Black leaders, U.S. intelligence murderous targeting of Tupac, MLK, Malcolm, Panthers, Hendrix, Marley, rappers, and linked ethnic leftists. Very good book. Look at that paperback from $59. That thing cost $60. Wow. When I got it, it wasn't that much. Another good book, as you can see, Drugs as a Weapon, as Weapons Against Us. So, you know, they'll pull you over and say, oh, I smell marijuana. Step out the car. And from there, you're probably not going to make it home, or you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. to plant something in the car. You know what I mean? Did that with Asada Shakur. His family, his bloodline was pretty heavy into, you know, revolutionary work. But we got to understand that one thing that they were lacking was following the law, statutes, commandments. You know what I mean? It's good to be a revolutionary. It's good to fight the power, but you got to follow the law, statutes, commandments to have the protection of the Most High God. So this book costs $60 now. That is crazy. All right. But the thing about it, the reason why I mentioned that is the MO, you know, they'll send a beautiful woman. They know a lot about us now. Just think about it like that. From Facebook, what you like, what you dislike, what makes you angry, what makes you sad. You know what I mean? Pandora, your favorites, music, you know, what you can't stand and all that, right? So they have a electric footprint on every one of us, right? So they know that, you know, you might like tall women, you know, somebody like short women, women with afros, women with braids or whatever, and they'll send her, and you know what I mean. It'll be the downfall. So this is something that Esau does. Like I said, drugs. They're always smelling marijuana and getting you out your car. You know, they'll do these things to discredit you as best as they can, right? They'll put sexual cases on you, things that will, you know, you'll beat in court, but through the court of public opinion, you lost. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you got charged with doing this to a minor, or having this on his computer, child, you know, I don't even want to say the word, but you know what I mean? Having this on your computer. Now, when you go to court, it takes a year or two to go to court, and they're like, oh, we'll drop all the charges, but it's too late. You're already, your name has been dragged through the mud. So that's what they've done. You know, Mike Tyson, they talk about all these. Tupac, the woman that, you know, he was accused of assaulting, you know what I'm saying, where she came from. So he goes into detail. He got a whole bunch of Freedom of Information Act and a lot of stuff redacted. They're like, nope, can't tell you that, can't tell you that. So the stuff you get from freedom of information, they redact a lot of it because they're still doing it. The people that have done it are still alive, and they don't want you to know all their tactics. But he did an excellent job of putting this book together where it just, you understand that, man, these people really don't stop, and they're very good at what they do. So we just got to be aware. You know what I mean? One thing before we watch the video, one thing with Martin Luther King, they would send letters in his name to, like, you know, say I'm making this up, okay, but it was different leaders that he would send letters to, that the FBI would send letters to, and it'd be like, I'm making this one up, from Malcolm X, right? Malcolm X, I think that what you're doing is wrong, and you know you're leading the people wrong. Signed MLK. So this is back in the day before text messages and emails and stuff like that. So you get a letter like, yo, dude, you know what? I don't mess with him no more. You know what I mean? He has no idea why. So we have to be circumspect that could easily happen. You know what I'm saying? There was a big breach with AT&T where they get all your text messages and all your you know, phone calls and stuff like that from hackers, right? So these hackers, it can come out that, you know, well, this person said that person said this because it came out from the hackers. Everybody knows about the hack, but that doesn't mean it's true, that text message or that call or something to that nature. So you can't trust your enemy. You know what I mean? If you get a text message, say you get a text message from me, I don't like you, and that's totally out of blue. You're like, that doesn't sound like him. You know what I'm saying? You have to dig a little bit deeper. Don't just be like face value. Oh, well, he sent it from me. It's from his phone. They have access to things like that. Okay. So before I go on a rant, you know, anymore, we're going to look at these videos and see what the warfare is that they've accomplished. Okay, let's bring that out. Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 10.
Con, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 47 and verse 10. When everybody have it, please say Con.
Con.
Verse 10. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me.
Slakia. It got muffled.
Salakia.
Yeah.
Verse 10. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. And thou hast said in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me.
So these wicked devils, right? They trust in their wickedness, the evil that they do. That's their backbone. That's what keeps them up, right? And they say, none seeth me. Nobody knows what I'm doing. You know, it's all secret. It's all, you know what I mean? But the Most High will expose what they've done, what they've done. You know what I mean? You know, COINTELPRO is exposed by people breaking into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, and getting all the information out. And I'm pretty sure MK Ultra was in like the same type time. They found out that these people were doing this nefarious things. You know, the Most High exposed that. You know, it might be somebody that breaks into the office or somebody that secretly leaks it. This is the Most High letting us know this is what they're doing. All right. And their wisdom and knowledge. I went to Harvard. I went to Yale. These guys are the blue bloods, so to speak, right? But it's just you know, that is evil. You know what I mean? It's wicked things that these people have done and continue to do. Don't think this is over with. Because MK Ultra, you can put that in with the social medias, put it in with television. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the same thing. It's keep you, you know, zoned out. But we'll watch that and we'll talk more about it after this.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
In the early days of the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control. They funded an army of psychiatric institutions across the United States and Canada to perform experiments on unsuspecting patients using psychedelic drugs, sensory deprivation, electroshock treatment, and more. The program was known by its codename, MK Ultra. At the end of the Korean War, a number of freed American POWs came home seemingly brainwashed and espousing communist propaganda. American officials suspected that the soldiers had been subjected to what they thought were new communist mind control techniques. Alarmed by the situation, the newly formed CIA allocated $25 million for psychiatric experiments on human beings.
It was the most secret program ever conducted by the CIA in the United States. Patients at psychiatric hospitals, prisoners in federal institutions, and even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness or consent and experimented upon.
Initial projects within MK Ultra included Operation Midnight Climax.
They established what were called safe houses, where prostitutes would lure men to these apartments. And then once the men were in the apartments, they were dosed with LSD. And then they were basically studied by CIA scientists, usually behind a two-way mirror.
Another common practice was the hosting and observing of LSD-induced parties with live music. These parties were called acid tests, and the culture that grew out of them played a key role in the development of the hippie and psychedelic movements a few years later. However, some of the most damaging experiments occurred at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. There, under the direction of infamous Scottish-American psychiatrist Dr. Ian Cameron, unsuspecting patients, many of whom had common ailments such as postpartum depression, were experimented on with aggressive drug cocktails and extreme techniques.
My father was a victim of Dr. Cameron. He was a 27-year-old, healthy skier, canoeer, very athletic, and he had asthma. They told him if he went to the Allen Memorial, they could cure his asthma.
My father, Charles, was a patient of Dr. Cameron's. He had a trigeminal neuralgia, it's called, where there's a pain in the temple that radiates into the jaw that currently is excruciatingly painful. They told him that it was psychosomatic. which it's not, but in those days, what did they know? So they sent him to a shrink. This shrink that he went to was working with Cameron, although we didn't know. So he put my father right into the program.
I was having trouble with my parents. My father and my stepmother decided to put me in the Allen Memorial Institute. They had no idea what went on in there. I was 16 when I was there.
Dr. Cameron pursued a concept he called depatterning, which was meant to reduce patients to an infantile psychological state wherein doctors could take advantage of the person's cognitive vulnerability to attempt to rebuild their mind under the doctor's control. A popular method of choice to achieve this was called psychic driving.
The day that my father was brought to the hospital, they immediately put him on insulin, to put him into like an insulin coma. They took clips from the interview with the shrink and put it on tape to run a loop under his pillow while he was put into the sleep treatment.
He also was put in an insulin coma for 36 days with a recording beside him saying that your mother hates you over and over and over and over and over.
That was beside my bed constantly, repeatedly 250,000 and 500,000 times.
Another common method was the use of extreme Page-Russell electroshock therapy.
Page-Russell shock treatment is approximately 40 to 75 times the strength of a normal shock treatment. So it's really designed to wipe out the memory.
He received 54 high voltage shock treatments, followed by 54 grand mal seizures.
After 27 days of this, they said that they were discouraged because he still had ties to his former life, in that he was asking to see his wife. They decided to give him more Page-Russell shock treatments and put him to sleep for another 30 days.
When patients were released from the Allen Memorial, they and their families' lives would never be the same again.
Well, there's a lot I could not remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were.
He never came out the same. He had a blank look in his eye. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know we were his daughters. He lost his job. We went into poverty after he came out.
He had said in his interview with the shrink that I was the apple of his eye. And after he came home, he started beating me not long after.
In 1973, the MK Ultra program was terminated. Some of the evidence of its activities was systematically erased.
The whole thing was basically discovered because of a whistleblower named John Marks, who wrote the first book really about the program called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. There were congressional hearings here in the United States in the mid-70s after it had been exposed. And during those hearings, the CIA finally admitted that this program existed. They admitted that it was probably not the right thing to do, but they feigned innocence.
Despite the congressional hearings and marginal interest in the subject in popular culture, most MK Ultra survivors suffered in silence, taking their trauma with them to the grave. Today, having received no formal apology or compensation, the children of some survivors are pursuing a class action lawsuit against the institutions they deem responsible.
You know, the CIA knew that it was breaking, every moral, ethical, and legal law in the books to do these experiments.
They all were behind it. They all knew what they were doing, but they weren't doing it out of care or love. They were doing it out of military and political reasons.
I am on medication now because of what happened to me when I was 16. I have not had any compensation or apology. I want everyone to know in Canada what went on in that horrible, horrible hospital.
While historians and survivors have exposed MK Ultra's exploits to the world, much remains unknown about its extent and wider impact. Given the highly sensitive nature of the program's activity, it is likely this will remain the case for years to come.
All right. So as you see, MK Ultra, you would think that was a thing of the past, but one thing they understand is you make drugs readily accessible, right? Some K2 just comes out of nowhere. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be like a smell good you know, incense, right? But people smoke it and they lose their collective mind. And it's in gas stations and stuff like that, you know, Tukey. If you have a probation officer and you can't smoke marijuana, they say, hey, smoke that, right? And you know, I've known some people that pretty much went insane smoking that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Came out of nowhere, right? We'll just pretend that the CIA has nothing to do with any of these things, right? And it's all in the hood. You know, you're not going to find that in any white neighborhoods, right? No Edomite neighborhoods. Marijuana is now legal, right? You can go into a store and buy it wherever you know what I mean? If you have medical or recreational, you can get it pretty much anywhere in the United States, even though there's people that are still locked up for engaging in marijuana sales and stuff like that. Even Brooklyn had a big marijuana bust. And I'm thinking to myself, it's kind of legal. So how are you busting people for that now? But you have to get like a, you know, a permit, you know, which costs $100,000, $200,000, whatever it is, something ridiculous. The only corporations can really afford to sell it. So that would be Esau as well, for the most part. And they know people are going to engage in that, go home, watch TV. So now you are in that dreamlike state, watching whatever they want to impart in your mind. You know what I'm saying? And this is MK Ultra. You're doing it to yourselves now. When I say use, talking about this period, you know, the Americans, you know, people that live in America. And they know if we can get you to think a certain way on each channel, because six companies own all the media in the United States, right? So they're going to keep saying, Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. You turn on MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, you know, go back to BBC, whatever. They're saying the same thing over and over again. So you're like, it has to be true. So it's brainwashing. You know, what the lady said, they'll have recordings next to their ears and I'll keep repeating the same thing over and over again. Same thing with the TV. All right. Same thing with IG. You know what I'm saying? Facebook, it's just the same thing repeated over and over and over again. You're like, man, this is all over my timeline. Not an accident. Facebook actually got in trouble for doing that because they'll put the most emotional thing to the top of your timeline that will have you stay on Facebook longer. You know what I'm saying? Oh, let me get in this conversation. Let me read these comments. You know what I'm saying? So, and it fits their agenda. Okay. All right, let's get Revelation 18 and 23. That was a good movie. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The electric shock therapy and have you, you know, thinking you're crazy. You know what I'm saying? All they do is put you in there and they use all types of experiments on you. All right. And like we were bringing out regarding that, you know, it still exists to this day. Let's get into Hollywood. What is Hollywood doing right now? Okay. Let's bring that out. Revelation 18, verse 23.
Khan, this is the book of Revelation, chapter 18 and verse 23. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
All right.
Khan, verse 23. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived.
It's talking about Babylon, okay? By their sorceries were all nations deceived. They honestly believe when you come to America, the streets are literally paved with gold. There's milk and honey flowing. You know what I mean? They don't show you K&A, you know, in the movies. You know, they don't show you the projects. You know what I'm saying? They don't show you how they don't upkeep places like, say, Jackson, Mississippi, where they don't even fill potholes. I'm talking about Jackson, Mississippi. Philadelphia don't even fill potholes. But I know I was watching the story on Jackson, Mississippi, how people have to go out there with their cones and put it, you know, put a cone by there, put a cone in the pothole so people don't just go in there and get stuck in there because they're like little mini sinkholes. You know, they have plants growing out of their potholes down there. So they don't show stuff like that. They want, you know, and Edomites are always the hero. Always. The black man always dies first in every horror movie. I think, what was it? LL Cool J made it to the end or something like that in one movie. And if I'm not mistaken, like Halloween. First time ever, you know what I'm saying? Since the beginning of cinema. So these are sorceries, these are witchcraft, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's making people believe something that's not true. You know, the Edomites aren't always the heroes, they're always the villain. You know what I'm saying? They're always the one that wants to take over the world and, you know, take over people's minds and just get an unlimited amount of power, you know. Nothing for anybody else, always for them. You know what I'm saying? And let's watch a video on that. Okay. Regarding, let's get Micah 5 and 12 on deck. And let's see what Holly Weird, they called Holly Weird, you know, with what's his name? Harvey Weinstein's and stuff like that. But the government, it's a government-run institution. And you're going to see through this video, and you got to look, we're looking at BBC, now it's Al Jazeera, Fair Use Act, right? But places outside the United States don't want nobody to know about this. So, you know, classes like this, make sure you share, like and subscribe. You know what I'm saying? Sounds cliche, but, you know, let's get the message out, okay, that these things are going on. The movies that we're watching are the money in the budget, the Pentagon gives it. Think about it. Who produces these movies? You know what I'm saying? It costs millions and millions of dollars to produce these movies. All right, let's watch this video.
Sexual one of sexual misconduct against Harvey Weinstein.
Watch any big budget war movie or take in a spy thriller, and you could walk away not knowing just how much your movie experience was shaped by the Pentagon or CIA. However, a trove of official documents obtained under US Freedom of Information laws and published this year detail the dealings between filmmakers and intelligence officials at Langley, Virginia, the CIA headquarters.
Probably the best known are Zero Dark 30 and Argo, but they've also assisted the television show Homeland.
How do we deal with homegrown violent jihadists?
They've also assisted Alias.
They work for the very enemy you thought you were fighting.
24. CBS series called The Agency.
That is strong.
They assisted a film called The Sum of All Fears, starring Ben Affleck.
Jack Ryan, CIA. Charlie Wilson's War is a really good example where they maintain the idea that, oh, you know, are we really doing the right thing by arming the Mujahideen, the forerunners of the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization in Afghanistan in the 1980s? They kind of question that in a kind of jokey way, like the last caption in the film Charlie Wilson's War is something like, "Oh, we came, we saw, but then we mucked up the end game," or some joke. You know, it's like, no, that's not what you did actually, and you know it because the original script and the original book that you base this on doesn't say that. You armed terrorists in a really horrific conflict. It's the whole organization behind it at a systematic level, and that turned Charlie Wilson's War into this, you know, saccharine, benign movie.
Throughout the 1990s, the CIA worked with Hollywood very specifically on movies that portrayed the CIA as sort of a heroic force protecting America. Most of the movies were based on Tom Clancy books, actually. So you had A Hunt for Red October and that entire franchise. You know, the lead character, Jack Ryan, is this like super heroic figure, and he's like constantly, you know, taking down bad guys, saving America, saving the world from various threats, whether it's Islamic terrorism or the IRA or ultimately white supremacists.
Between them, the CIA and the US Department of Defense have had varying levels of input, from simply clarifying points for authenticity to actually writing parts of scripts on more than 1,800 movies and TV shows. When it comes to influencing filmmakers, shaping the story, the Pentagon is usually in a stronger negotiating position than the CIA. Because of the hardware at its disposal, it can shut down a movie before a scene is ever shot.
The Department of Defense is actually a much more powerful player in the entertainment industry for basically financial reasons. The Department of Defense has expensive toys. They have submarines, they have aircraft carriers, they have tanks, and they have the personnel to operate each of those things. So if a filmmaker wants to make a war movie, they often will approach the Department of Defense and basically ask to borrow that equipment. And the Department of Defense will say, maybe, but can I see your script? And they will either say, this is great, we love the way that the military is portrayed in this, we will go ahead and collaborate with you. Or they may say, we hate the way that we're portrayed and refuse to participate.
When the Pentagon does agree to support a film, there can be some scripting strings attached. And the Vietnam War is clearly a sore point. In The Hulk, a reference to a US operation that poisoned Vietnamese farmland was removed. And in the Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies, a suggestion that the US did not win the war was cut out. In Iron Man, a reference to soldier suicides was removed, again at the Pentagon's insistence. The CIA's presence in Hollywood is harder to detect. It goes back to the early days of the Cold War and was designed to counter a propaganda effort coming out of the Soviet Union. The CIA placed undercover agents in major studios where they monitored left-wing screenwriters and directors. This was at the height of Cold War paranoia, and Hollywood was under the scrutiny of the US Congress.
Investigating alleged communist influence and infiltration in the moving picture industry.
The agency started influencing scripts. One senior executive at Paramount Pictures, working covertly for the CIA, described how, to counter what the Soviets were saying about the persecution of African Americans, quote, well-dressed Negroes, unquote, would be planted in certain films.
What happens in the 1990s is that the Cold War ends. And all of a sudden, the CIA is left without a visible, viable enemy to justify its existence. If they were going to continue, they had to do something to improve their public image. And one of the responses to that crisis was to begin to work with Hollywood to convince the American public that, and Congress, that they were still worth being an institution.
In 1996, the CIA's Entertainment Liaison Office in Hollywood began offering free support to movies that featured the agency. Chase Brandon, an intelligence agent and cousin of actor Tommy Lee Jones, was the CIA's first liaison officer. He's credited as a technical advisor on a host of Hollywood blockbusters, such as The Recruit, starring Al Pacino as a veteran CIA officer.
Our failures are known, our successes are not.
In reality, Brandon was far more than a mere advisor on The Recruit. He helped pitch the film to Disney, that eventually produced and distributed the movie, and was involved in the script writing.
The Recruit.
As another CIA liaison officer put it, Hollywood is the only way the public learns about the agency, which begs the question, should the public be learning about the CIA from the CIA without even being aware of the agency's role in the production process? These issues became public with the release of one of the biggest CIA Hollywood collaborations to date, Zero Dark 30, a film about the search for Osama bin Laden.
You really believe this story? Osama bin Laden? The Zero Dark 30 was a really unusual case, I think, for the CIA in terms of how it works with Hollywood. The CIA gave the director and screenwriter a lot of access to the agency. They bounced a lot of ideas back and forth, and they wanted to really kind of tightly control the narrative that this was putting out. It backfired, though, because very quickly after the movie came out, it was criticized for suggesting that torture somehow had played a role in the information gathering that led to the capture and assassination of Osama bin Laden.
Torture and the CIA's use of it, especially after 9/11, were already under investigation when Zero Dark 30 was released. The Senate Intelligence Committee wrote a letter to the production studio, Sony Pictures. They said, "We believe the film is grossly inaccurate and misleading in its suggestion that torture resulted in information that led to the location of Osama bin Laden." Zero Dark 30's director, Catherine Bigelow, eventually had to respond to the allegation that her film was making the CIA's case for torture. In an editorial for the Los Angeles Times, She wrote that critics were, quote, confusing depiction with endorsement. Torture was, as we all know, employed in the early years of the hunt. That doesn't mean it was the key to finding bin Laden. It means it's a part of the story we couldn't ignore.
That's more of a problem with the film industry and the creative industry. Total disinterest in the responsibility of the ideological products that they create. And this is why you can have a very liberal town full of very liberal or even sometimes left-wing celebrities and directors, but actually they create films that are very much in keeping with the American Empire project.
The CIA rarely has any kind of public credit that suggests that they had any hand in shaping the narrative of that film. That lack of transparency I find incredibly problematic because it doesn't allow the viewer to be a smart, critical viewer.
How about this? Why don't they just have at the beginning of each film, made with the support of the Central Intelligence Agency? Let's see how long the practice lasts then. Because it won't. Because people will look at it and say, oh, it's one of those propaganda films.
Okay, so as you can see, they Hollywood is terrible. Okay. But now I want to show you this guy. He's an executive producer, right? Arnon. And they say the Jewish people don't run Hollywood. That's what they say. Some things are just pretty obvious, but let's see. Let's get this guy up. Put him on a Summer Jam screen. Okay. Milchan, Arnon Milchan, if I'm saying his name right, is an Israeli billionaire businessman, film producer, and former spy. And former, I'm sure they use that, we use that lightly, you know what I'm saying? Some people, once a spy, always a spy, they'll say, right? He has been involved in over 130 full-length motion pictures and founder of production company Regency Enterprise. Regency's film credits includes 12 Years a Slave. What do you know? You know what I'm saying? Remember at the end where he's like holding on to the, come on, I'll get you out of here. He's like, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You know what I mean? JFK. So what he does, obviously, with film and the witchcraft of the film is you could just skew, you know, things in the direction you want to go. You know, like JFK, you know, magic bullet, you know, nothing to see here. It wasn't a whole conspiracy to get him out of here, right? Heat, Fight Club, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, LA Confidential. Let's go further down. Natural Born Killers, you know, that was a crazy movie, you know what I'm saying? But it gets, once you see something, you can't unsee it, you know, and they understand that. They understand that witchcraft, right? Noah, okay, because Noah was white and so was everybody else. I don't know where we came from, right? In his eyes, obviously. You know, Shem, Ham, Japhet, everybody was apparently white in that time period. So we evolved from them. Is that what he's saying? What else we got? What interests me with this guy was, what's his controversy? Oh, look at that. In February 2018, him along with Benjamin Netanyahu were charged with bribery. The recommendation of the case, nicknamed Case 1000, relates to alleged bribes Milchan provided to Netanyahu in exchange for special tax exemption legislation believed to benefit Milchan and his homeland of Israel. Interesting. I did not know that he was involved in that. According to police, the gifts Milchan were worth more than 1 million shekels. Milchan's law. Look at that. So this is the type of person we're talking about, obviously, that is in a bribery case with the daggone prime minister of Israel. All right. So keep that in mind. You know what I mean? When we're talking about the movies that he has made and how it's skewed. Due to his health, he did not appear in person at Jerusalem courthouse, gave a video testimony. It doesn't say when he got locked up. His testimony began in 2023, and he probably never see a day in jail. Okay, I want to get to the productions that he had. Black Knight, okay, Martin Lawrence. Him and Martin Lawrence have been pretty close as far as movies goes. It's really the ones I wanted to see was Freddie Got Fingered. That's weird. Big Mama's House, where you put black men in dress. That's something that he does. All right. He is definitely about that. You got Chipmunk movies. So these movies, all it takes is just one line. One line is worth the millions of dollars it costs to make these movies. Because you're watching it, it's just one lie. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, that person's over there. He's Jewish. You know what I'm saying? And, you think, oh, that's what Jewish people look like, or the real Jews look like. One line is all it takes. So when you watch his movies, keep in mind, he's a spy. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be something that you keep constantly repeating over and over again. If he makes 130 movies, he could put them, he could put his propaganda in those 130 movies with one line, and it sinks in. Trust and believe. Okay? So this is the movies that he's made in his lifetime. 6 Degrees of Separation. Then Will Smith had to do something strange in that movie. Yeah. Did homosexual acts in that movie. Yep. Devil's Advocate. Of course he made that. Why wouldn't he? You know what I'm saying? That's the devil. Falling Down, the white man fighting back. Remember that one? You know what I'm saying? He's shooting up all the gang members were Hispanic, right? Black and Hispanic. Everybody was doing bad in that movie was Hispanic, right? And the white man fought back. Okay? Keep that in mind. We're not gonna, all right. Man on Fire was Harry Crumb. So when you watch these movies, if you haven't and you plan on ever watching this movie, just see what is he trying to say? What is this Israeli spy who has the power to bribe the daggone prime minister of Israel? What is he trying to tell you? Okay. All right. And with that, we'll move on. Let's bring on Slocky. Bring out Micah chapter 5 and verse 12, Bubba Shaw.
Khan, this is the book of Micah, chapter 5 and verse 12. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
Khan. Khan, verse 12. And I will cut off witchcrafts out of thy hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayer.
So the Most High is going to cut all this out. Okay, let's expose it. Most High is going to cut it out. You know what I'm saying? Once we know, and I'm sure brothers are aware of, and sisters are aware of the fact that Hollywood is just a propaganda machine. Do you know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of our brothers and sisters that have no idea. And they think this is, what? It's just a movie. What are you talking about? Oh, you always saying something, man. Oh, super woke. Oh, Mr. Conspiracy Theory. But as you see, Israeli Spy is the one making these 130 of these major motion pictures. And you can imagine that's just one person, one producer, one executive producer. What about everybody else? What are they trying to say? What's the message they're trying to give to everybody? All right. The Most High going to cut all that stuff out, man. You know what I mean? These are the last days. Let's figure these things out. All right, let's go to Zechariah 1 verse 15. We're going to talk about the next one is what happens in the prison systems. Now, this is warfare, okay? He didn't have to pick up any gun to do any of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? All he had to do was get in where he fit in, start making these movies, right? He's an Israeli spy, so he's funded by the country of Israel. You know what I'm saying? Those degenerates, right? Funded by an entire country, go over there and start making movies, you know, and push that propaganda. You'll never see anything negative about Israel and or the Jewish people in none of those movies. But of course, in 12 Years a Spy, 12 Years a Slave, you see Jake getting abused. That's funny to them. They probably cracked up at that. And you know, hey, Martin, they like Martin, right? Look at them having fun, and you know, everybody's enjoying the Martin episodes, and you got Tommy go get a job, and Cole, you stupid Cole. That's funny, right? Put that nigga in the dress. You know, give him all the money you can give him to make him wear that dress. You know what I'm saying? These people are wicked, man. It's witchcraft. Okay, let's bring that out. Zechariah 1 verse 15.
Khan, this is the book of Zechariah, chapter 1 and verse 15. When everybody have it, please say Khan. Khan. Khan, verse 15. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction.
So let's talk about it. All right. They just keep going. They're not going to stop. You know what I'm saying? The Most High has to stop them. That's why there's no repentance for the Edomites, because they're just on go all the time. None of this stuff has stopped. Okay. So whether it's the movies, you know, or the jails, you know what I'm saying? Let's see what happens in the jails. In Philadelphia, right? So Philadelphia is, you know, from the outside looking in and the inside looking in, a violent city, right? Right. A lot of extreme violence happens here. So when you go into the prison, it's supposed to be a rehabilitation center. But what if you go in there and you're worse? You know, you get in there, and by the time you get out, you're even worse, right? And that's what happens. And this happens all around the country. This one was exposed, right, of what they do to brothers inside of prisons. What, you know, I worked in a juvenile facility, lockdown facility, and I seen the nurses pushing vaccines on people. You know what I'm saying? Like, go ahead, come on, take it. You don't want to take it? What, do you want to get sick? Guy's like, man, look, I don't want to take it. Like, I don't want nothing to do with that. They're like, all right. I mean, you can take it. It's free. You know what I mean? It's just constant pushing stuff on. They want to get you, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say the word, but you know what I mean? They want things injected inside of you. You know, it's not for your benefit. You know, they say it's for your benefit, but as you can see, it's a lot of experimentations going on in these facilities. All right, let's talk about it. And let's get Jeremiah 50 and 33 on deck, because it's just Jake and Ephraim in this particular one. All right, just Jake and Ephraim that are really getting experimented on. Let's continue on. Remember, this is called agenda. Talking about the agenda, and this is warfare. This is what chemical warfare looks like.
The city of Philadelphia is now offering an apology for what they did to inmates some years ago. Let's put up the picture. We have an aerial shot here. The city of Philadelphia issued last Thursday a formal apology for unethical human experiments conducted on mostly Black prisoners at Holmesburg Prison. This prison was known as the Terror Dome. During its heyday, it was a source of extreme violence. It is now inactive. But between the 1950s and the 1970s, it was the site of horrid experimentation conducted by a University of Pennsylvania faculty member. I got the details. Approximately 300 men were exposed to herpes, fungus, asbestos, LSD, skin blistering chemicals, radioactive isotopes, and many more. Even components connected to Agent Orange. University of Pennsylvania, let's put him up. Dermatologist, Dr. Albert K. Kligman is known for patenting acne medication, Retin-A, conducted these experiments from 1951 to 1974, made a bunch of money. Johnson & Johnson, Dow Chemicals, and the U.S. Army were just some of the many sponsors of these underground human experiments led by that doctor. Later in his life, Dr. Kligman would say, and I quote, "Shutting the prison experiments down was a big mistake." Kligman forcibly removed the subjects' thumbnail and infected them with ringworm, among other chilling trials that left the subjects wounded and disoriented. Most of these incarcerated individuals were not sentenced, and they were actually awaiting trial. The prison used their desperation for bail money to get them to agree to these abusive experiments, usually paying the subjects $1 a day. After obtaining 1,800 pages of Pentagon records, the Inquirer published a report in 1979 detailing a contract between Penn and the U.S. Army, with Dr. Kligman at the helm of the research. More than 300 inmates tested mind-control drugs and potential skin hardeners to protect soldiers from chemical warfare. In the latter experiments, the paper found inmates complained bitterly of side effects, including inflammation that lasted weeks and eventually eliminated the willingness of the subjects to go on. So even with them being in an incarcerated environment, having no access to resources, and this experiment being placed in front of them like a dangling carrot, they even came to the conclusion that it was not worth what their bodies were experiencing because of these experiments. How diabolical is this? We're just getting the full story of what happened to these individuals. Experiment survivors, like this man. Leotis Jones will leave the prison and become an influential activist and community leader, bearing scars from the experiments for the rest of his life. He had been told he was being injected with a rare disease from India. By 2000, close to 300 former prisoners who reported injuries from the experiments would then sue the city, Penn and Dr. Kligman. The suit missed the statute of limitations, even as Kligman continued to receive accolades for his advancements in dermatology. Well, here's what I'm going to do, sir. I am going to attempt to set the record straight and provide absolute context for how you got the legacy you enjoy today. I hope you appreciate it. Let's put his picture up. Kligman died 10 years later, February 2010, legacy of being a champion for advancements as it relates to skincare. That legacy has benefited not only him personally when he was living, but also his family and many companies today. After demands by activists last Thursday, the mayor, Jim Kenney, said without excuse, "We formally and officially extend a sincere apology to those who are subjected to this inhumane and horrific abuse." Good for you, Mayor. I got some words for you. Where's the money? Where is the compensation? Damn your apology without remedy. You know exactly what happened here. Now, while you were not the one oversaw this, it is your problem to fix. It doesn't have to be your fault, sir, to be your responsibility. You decided to be mayor. You wanted the job. Now you have it. Leadership comes with criticism and hard decisions. You volunteered for this post. You wanted it. You got it. It's your problem now. Solve it. The University of Penn. The University of Penn. The Journal of the American Medical Association Dermatology and Penn Medicine are all struggling with what to do with the legacy of Dr. Kligman. Oh my gosh, what do we do? How do we solve this? I mean, we benefited so much as a society because of the experiments he did on individuals who were human beings. What do? Tell the truth. He set the record straight. The people he violated were human. Think about it this way. Do whatever you would do. Respond the way you would normally respond if somebody did it to a person you love. So they are now considering taking away various honors, including professorships named after Dr. Kligman. They also issued an apology of their own, renamed the annual lecture, which bore his name, and pulled funds that would have normally been allocated in his name, and now will be giving them to dermatology residents working with people of color and their skin issues. Some monies will also be directed into fellowship for soon-to-be dermatologists who are interested in working with dark skin. Not enough. What are you doing for the families?
Because that's obviously still going to be going to Esau, right? Families get nothing. Let's keep going.
What are you doing for the families who are connected to these individuals who are temporarily incarcerated? What are you doing for them, those who are still surviving? This story is not over. All right, Jeff, thoughts here.
You know, while apologies and admissions of guilt are great, and it's more than some in this situation are going to get, sadly, I'm sure this isn't the only prison population that's been experimented on. As you stated clearly, a lot of entities need to come up out their pockets in order to fill the pockets of the others whose family members were suffering. These men were suffering. I also want to add, because I'm sure somewhere somebody's going to be like, well, A, they were paid pennies on the dollars for it, and B, they agreed to it. No. These men were desperate for money in order to get out of their situation. And so they agreed, not knowing exactly what was going to happen to them. They were suffering.
Yeah.
And so now moving forward, when it comes to his legacy, take it down. We don't need his name on buildings or his name on scholarships or anything like that. While you're doing it, tell everybody what's going on and how they came to be. His fortune came from some really messed up situations off the back of a lot of Black men, just like much of U.S. history. So take him down.
And remember, according to the narrative, they were told it was something else. They weren't told what this was really about. They were tricked. And there's a doctrine in contract law that talks about unequal bargaining power. You don't get more equal than having basically the director of a jail tell you, you must do this or this is going to happen to you. All right, that's unequal bargaining power.
I can start here.
All right, so let's get Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 33.
God, this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 50 and verse 33. When everybody have it, please say con. Con.
Con.
Con, verse 33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go.
Con. So he said that was Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom in that jail, and is doing experiments on them. You know what I mean? These people are diabolical. You know what I mean? And you know, they don't stop. You know, this hasn't stopped, you know. And the effects that happen, you know what I mean, is still ongoing. Wasn't that long ago. You know, this is, oh, it was hundreds of years ago. No, it wasn't that long ago. That jail just closed. All right. Bring that out. Isaiah 10 and 20.
Con, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 10 and verse 20. And it reads, and it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth.
Huh, you know, and let these people get their judgments, you know, because Johnson and Johnson is a huge corporation, and they were using our men as guinea pigs, our nation as guinea pigs, you know. So I didn't even get into really, you know, the hospitals. You know, these hospitals are private run as well, you know, and you look at it like, oh, who's this guy? Get this guy off the scholarship. It wasn't him. You know what I'm saying? He was the face of this, but this is government run. These are government run programs. You know, the U.S. Army had a contract with University of Penn. You know, the last one about St. Louis we're going to talk about is going to go into Stanford. So it bothers me when, you know, you see our brothers, you know, oh man, I got a 4.8 GPA, 20,000 on the SATs, never missed a day of school, and I got accepted to the University of Penn, and everybody's all happy. You know what I mean? I got accepted to Stanford. These places are terrible places. Do you know what I'm saying? With terrible alumni, you know, that can't stand you. That's why the so-called quote unquote minorities at the school, that goes with the Asians and everybody that, you know what I mean, that aren't Edomites, they be ready to off themselves. And they do. They have a high, like, University of Penn has a high, I don't want to say the word because it messes up algorithms, but they unalive themselves. You know what I'm saying? A high unalivement rates at these schools because it's just blatant racism. You know what I'm saying? Um, and that's what it's meant to do. That's pretty much what it's meant to do. You know, we don't like, oh man, I got accepted to Lincoln. Yeah, you know, I got accepted in the Morehouse. Yay. You know what I'm saying? No, nobody cheering that. We get accepted when, you know, they're happy and excited and have parties when they accepted into Esau's institutions. They're blatantly racist. You know, let's go to was it Jeremiah 23 or 6?
Khan, this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23 and verse 6. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
Khan, verse 6. In his days, Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. And this is his name, whereby he shall be called the Lord our righteousness.
You know, I mean, that's important. Safety is important. Everybody, you know, some people might be like, man, I'm getting a crown. I'm getting, you know, the gold is going to be like clear like glass and everything. Man, how about some safety, man? You know what I'm saying? How about like knowing that you ain't gotta, if you go into a hospital, you know, for a headache, they won't just, like I said, delete you and take all your kidneys and your melanin and everything else. You know what I mean? Like what's his name? Kendrick Johnson. They opened them up and everything was just paper. You know, they put in newspaper where his organs are. Stealing organs. You know what I'm saying? And anybody get in trouble for that? Not at all. You know? Does anybody even care about that anymore? It's off the radar, you know? So hospitals, you go into you have child support payments, you get locked up, you know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden you come out with all types of diseases and everything and cancer and all this because of what they shot you up with. They make you take all types of medications and all that. Seroquel. Oh, you're upset? You're upset you're in jail? You know, I ask you like, do you feel upset right now? Like, yeah, I'm locked up. Okay, so we'll get you a prescription. You know what I'm saying? They're putting you on a whole bunch of drugs. By the time you get out, your mind is mush. You gotta come back to normal, but you know, your body is used to those drugs. You know what I'm saying? That happens to a lot of brothers that get released out of prison. You know, now you got to get and to get a job, right? We want to talk about this in the next one. We're going to talk about this, you know. You'll be working for Walmart by making furniture and everything in there. But when you come out and they say, oh, you got a felony, now you can't work for us. Well, hold on, I was working for y'all like 5 minutes ago when I was locked up, but now I can't. This is slavery. This is where we're at. Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 33. You know, welcome to America. That's why they have the propaganda machines of the TV and the movies to make it seem like this place is better than what it is. But it's, you know, it's like it's hell. You know, heaven for Esau, hell for the 12 tribes of Israel. All right. And notice when a lot of things, you know, the issues or, you know, the things that were happening in for MK Ultra, they're just showing Edomites that are going through it. And in this case right here, they're showing us an Edomite woman that her son got arrested for like something really small, and the judge, paid for play judge, you know, was getting money off locking people up. But they just show the Edomites. Do you understand that this is definitely happening, Jake, all over the place? You know what I'm saying? Let's bring that out. Deuteronomy 28, verse 33.
Khan, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 33. When everybody have it, please say Khan. Khan, verse 33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed away.
Okay, so this is oppression. This is crushed. Okay, let's get Job 35 and verse 9, and we're going to play the video. And we just kept Job on deck. All right.
My kid's not here. He's dead because of him. He ruined my fucking life.
In 2011, a judge in Pennsylvania was put on trial.
We turn now to the latest news in the so-called Kids for Cash scandal in Pennsylvania, in which judges took money in exchange for sending thousands of juvenile offenders to for-profit youth jails.
Judge Ciavarella was charged with taking millions of dollars in kickbacks for sending children away for crimes as minor as mocking a teacher online.
And he said, well, I'm coming down to arrest her for making a MySpace page about her vice principal.
The scandal was one of many plaguing an industry that has often sought profit over justice.
Many who served in private prisons say officials had incentives to keep prisoners there rather than rehabilitating them.
Today, the U.S. imprisons more people, both per capita and in terms of number of people incarcerated, than any other country in the world.
African Americans are being incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans.
We have more African Americans in this country under criminal supervision right now than all of the slaves in 1850.
In a step to address racial inequity, President Biden signed an executive order in 2021 banning all private prison contracts by the federal government.
This is the first step to stop corporations from profiting off of incarceration.
But companies have found ways to continue profiting off the multi-billion-dollar industry.
As the Trump administration continues to crack down on undocumented immigrants, the majority of them will be sent to detention facilities run by private companies.
This industry has started to shift into what I like to call mass incarceration 2.0.
In Los Angeles County, for example, in the last 6 years, has increased the use of electronic monitors by 5,000%.
I don't really like that I have cameras in my house. I don't like being recorded.
So will the private prison ban lead to a fairer justice system?
And I was talking about who's wrong. I was in bed and just woke me up.
Or has it provoked something altogether more sinister?
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
In the 80s and 90s, the war on drugs and harsh sentencing policies meant the US prison population skyrocketed.
Last year alone, over 10,000 drug criminals were convicted.
Overcrowding in this 10-year-old prison is already a problem. 2 to a cell designed for 1.
Private firms stepped in, offering to build more facilities.
and faster.
I think we'll see the private sector saving the taxpayers a tremendous amount of money.
But it wasn't long before they had problems.
New questions are being raised tonight about the wisdom of turning public prisons over to private operators.
It became apparent that, in many cases, profits were prioritized over the care of those housed inside.
Private prisons raise a lot of the same issues that are raised in publicly run facilities. However, these issues are often exacerbated. In many cases, their officers are wildly underpaid and not paid benefits.
To save on costs, private companies usually offer fewer staff incentives and can struggle to retain employees. On the day of this 2018 riot in New Mexico, staff numbers were under 50%.
With keys to the entire 40-man cell block and no guards, the inmates take control.
There are only two ways to make money. One is to increase your revenues and one is to decrease your expenses. In the case of private prisons, increasing revenues means more bodies behind bars, and decreasing expenses means lower care and quality of care for those people who are in your custody.
When Joe Biden became president in 2020, many prison reform advocates were hopeful.
The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer.
Biden promised criminal justice reform, and his directive 6 days in seemed a step in the right direction.
He says he's pulling America out of the private prison business. It's a break with what the Trump administration had done.
However, for decades, the private prison industry has been finding other ways to fill empty beds.
After just a short time of the complex sitting vacant, it has a new tenant, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
What is happening is that these private prison industries are turning around and filling these same beds with people in immigration detention.
¡Abre la puerta!
1980s, 1990s. You saw the war on drugs. Now we're changing the laws as it pertains to marijuana. We're now seeing these prisons being filled by immigrants.
80% of undocumented immigrants are being held inside privately run facilities, generating over $1 billion for the two largest prison companies in 2020.
The Trump administration increased immigrant detention beds by over 50% in 4 years. And what we saw was the administration handed out sweetheart deals to private prison companies.
There's an incredible, I would say, financial incentive not to reduce incarceration, but to change the population.
And changing the population hasn't changed the problems, which range from abuse of solitary to medical neglect. Women in this privately run Georgia detention center accused the gynecologist of carrying out surgeries on them without their consent. The facility was then closed under Biden.
At what point did you realize that you had had surgery?
When I woke up and I saw the incisions, it turns out that I didn't need the procedure that was performed.
The tragedies that we see, particularly in facilities that are run by private prison companies, means death. It means unnecessary sickness and illness. What these private prison companies have in mind, of course, are their bottom line, and the abuses and the heartbreaks and the tragedies that we see are the unfortunate result of that.
Expanding immigration services is a new source of income for private companies, but there are others too.
Many of the for-profit firms that manage prisons and detention centers have also diversified.
The reality is that private interests have permeated our correctional and carceral system across the country.
From food and phone calls to healthcare, these companies have monetized all aspects of crime and punishment. Now, they're moving into a new frontier, electronic surveillance.
I told county that if they put 2 beacons up, that the signals would interrupt each other. And that's exactly what's happening. The violations have just gotten worse.
Mohawk Johnson has been on an ankle monitor for nearly 2 years after being arrested for alleged battery at a Black Lives Matter protest. He is still awaiting trial.
I don't really like that I have cameras in my house. I don't like being recorded all the time.
Let's bring that out. Job chapter 35 and verse 9.
Khan, this is the book of Job, chapter 35 and verse 9. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
Khan, verse 9. By reason of the multitude of oppressions, they make the oppressed to cry. They cry out by reason of the arm of the mighty.
You imagine that? Like, so, you know what I mean? It's overcrowding in the prisons. They said, no problem. We'll just imprison you in your own house. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's diabolical. And look at, and, 2 years before trial. You know what I mean? He still hasn't went to trial yet. So look at that. He has to have proof of where he's at. Look at, they call him up at 3:18, 3:16, 3:14, 3:30. Look at that. 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:39, 4:37. Always like, hey, you're not where you're supposed to be. Hey, you're not where you're supposed to be. Hey, and he's like, Lil, I'm in bed right now. Can you stop calling me? And can you imagine going through this for 2 years? You know what I'm saying? It's enough to drive you crazy. And obviously, they're not doing anything to alleviate this. You know what I'm saying? So that leads me to believe it's done on purpose. It's no accident. Okay, they know that, and I know a lot of young bulls that are on ankle monitors, and if you don't charge it, it goes off, and it says you're not where you're supposed to be. He's like, no, I'm home right now. But maybe the charger broke, or something goes wrong where they couldn't charge it, and now they're back in a lockdown facility. So it's really diabolical what these people do. All right. Also, let's get Baruch chapter 3, verse 8 on deck as well. We'll finish out this video.
He's placed cameras in his bedroom to capture how often he's woken up to be told he's not in his house.
I am not. I'm in bed. You just woke me up. Please stop waking me up. They call my actual leg monitor. It starts to vibrate and make a really loud noise.
The sheriff told me to move my beacon because I relocated.
The issues with his monitor have placed him in a constant state of anxiety.
May I ask why I keep getting called at work? This has happened like 6 or 7 times. It's gotten bad to the point that when my phone vibrates, I get scared because I think I'm in trouble.
I'm literally standing under my beacon.
We're really extending the boundaries of incarceration. Some people incarcerated in their homes, some people incarcerated in the jail.
These firms don't just collect money from the government. They charge people for their own incarceration.
In many cases, you're paying a daily fee to be on electronic monitoring. And those would be $5, $10 a day, up to the highest I've seen is $47.
$47 a day to be on the monitor. Okay. And JP Morgan has a huge investment in this. All right. So this is all JP Morgan is federally backed, federally commissioned bank. And they're heavily invested in ankle monitor systems. Okay, so it's all interconnected. Okay. Get people deeply in debt. And to get money off that interest and end up getting locked up for whatever reason, maybe fraud, trying to get some money, selling drugs to get some money, pay off your high mortgage rate that bank has allowed it. And now they have ankle monitor systems where it can cost up to $47 a day, not to mention how much the government is giving them just to house you, in your own home. All right. And for the ankle monitor system, very expensive, thousands of dollars. I forget how much it costs. But let's bring that out. Baruch chapter 3 and verse 8.
Khan, this is the book of Baruch, chapter 3 and verse 8. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
Verse 8. Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, whereas thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which departed from the Lord our God.
So subject to payments is a, you know, it's almost an understatement at this point because everything costs. You know, there's taxes on chips, taxes on water, taxes on everything you can think of. They tax it, and you don't see a whole lot of reprisal from that. It's just, you know, that money is going to their yachts and their boats and to their wars and their missiles. Okay, JP Morgan Chase had a boat that had tons of cocaine on it that came into Philadelphia. I think they end up charging like a couple people on the boat, but it's JP Morgan Chase's boat. And I'm not even sure about the charging, how much the person got as far as time goes. But if I have a car that's in my name and there's tons of cocaine in that car, best believe I'm going to go to jail. But if it's sanctioned by the United States, then, you know, they'll just give one of the workers all that time or whatever. All right, let's continue this on, and let's get First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 2 for the last video. All right. And if you want to watch the replay on this, it's on HOI News live streaming right now.
Ankle shackles has emerged as a term for these devices.
I've interviewed many Black people who have been on electronic monitors, and they repeatedly talk about when they look at their ankle, they think of a slave shackle.
6 for 5 each man, 6 foot by 1 foot 6. For each woman, 5 foot by 1 foot 4.
It's definitely a shackle. Like, they always frame it as if they're trying to rehabilitate people, but you can't really like trigger somebody's PTSD nonstop and then say that that's rehabilitated.
We have never asked these firms to focus on rehabilitation. Our experiment with private prisons in the US has been a massive failure.
Following the US's lead, in recent decades, other countries around the world have begun to experiment with privatization.
Scores of refugee and migrant children were held for months and even years by the Australian government at one of their refugee detention centers. Dozens of children still live in the camp's moldy tents.
I think one thing that always concerns us in the United States is the international precedent that it sets.
They've spread in a number of ways, particularly in the English-speaking world, in the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand.
But as the US starts to question the influence of these companies, what happens if other countries don't?
And my main concern going forward is not so much in developed countries, but in less developed countries where they might be persuaded to go down this road and end up regretting it later.
Okay. And as you noticed, the war on drugs, right? Slovakia. The war on drugs was a war on so-called Black people, right? And now, you know, since marijuana is legal, they're like, man, you know, there's not too many people, you know, really into these hard drugs and so forth and so on. So what we gonna do? We'll get the you know, the so-called immigrants that, you know, originally inhabited this land, and we'll lock them up for no good reason. Okay, now bring out this. If you heard it, I'm sure you heard about this. If not, you hear about it now, about Nixon, right? Erdogan, I believe his name is Jim Erdogan, if I'm saying his name right. War on drugs, is it a genuine public health crusade or attempt to carry out what the author Michelle Alexander characterized as the new Jim Crow, which is an excellent book. I advise everyone to read that. A new report by Dan Baum for Harper's Magazine suggests the latter. Specifically, Baum refers to the quote by John Erdeman, if I'm saying his name right, who served as domestic policy chief for President Richard Nixon when the administration declared its war on drugs in 1971. According to Baum, Erdeman said in 1994 that the drug war was a ploy to undermine Nixon's political opposition, meaning Black people and critics of the Vietnam War. At the time I was writing a book about the politics of drug prohibition, I started to ask Erdeman a series of earnest, wonky questions that he impatiently waved away. You want to know what this was really all about? He asked in a bluntness of a man who, after public disgrace of and a stench in federal prison, had little left to protect. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we're lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So anytime you got the president against you in the land that you live in, you're in bad shape. So people were like, why are you up there disrespecting the white man and saying all these negative things about him? You gonna get us in trouble. Nigga, you already in trouble. The person that has the highest seat in the nation that you live in can't stand you. You know what I'm saying? The only way you can go is the Most High God. The only thing you can do is follow these laws, statutes, commandments, and the Most High, if His mercy is bestowed upon us, He'll give us that level of protection where the people that are actively saying they want to kill us, you know what I mean, aren't able to. Okay, so let's get First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 2. Now, this next video, this is the last one. It's about an hour long, okay? So I'm going to let it play out. I'm not going to pause it and talk and everything, but I think this is important just to really, if you can't stay the whole time, then you can always come back and watch it, right? But I advise everybody to watch it because, now Esau's like, oh, there's chemtrails in the sky. There's always been chemtrails in the sky over our neighborhoods. This has always been happening, but one of the most documented case is in St. Louis. And as the elder brings out, when he said he was at St. Louis, he was talking to, the person I believe was at the hotel, and was like, yo, when you hear it, don't look at nobody in the eye. You know what I'm saying? Like, look down, because, they'll kill you for anything. So, and the same thing with like Philadelphia and the other cities and everything, but you got to understand that this chemical warfare that's been going on is so prevalent. It's in our bloods. It affects your brain. You know what I mean? You make bad decisions. This is what they want to happen. They want us to kill ourselves. And if we don't die, we end up getting cancer because of these chemicals that we put in the water, in the food, in the jabs, in the air, everywhere. Okay. And toys, there's lead in toys, Flint, Michigan, lead in water, all that stuff. But I'm not going to get into all that. You already know what it is, but this is going to be documented, okay? That this is what Esau is doing to Jacob. You know what I mean? May the Most High have no mercy on him. All right, let's bring that out. First Maccabees chapter 5, verse 2.
Khan, this is the book of First Maccabees, chapter 5 and verse 2. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
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 Khan, verse 2. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them. And thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people.
And we won't be doing nothing wrong with these people. We won't be bothering them, nothing. They're like, you know what we should do? We should kill those Black people down the street. Okay, and you're going to see that in this video. Not bothering them, but they're like, you know what? We're going to get that land. You know what I'm saying? And whether they want it or not. It's not necessarily that they want the land and need more money. It's because it will destroy us and make our lives worse. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 33 and verse 1, and we're going to start the video. And these Slacky, these videos and this stuff can be distressing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, ultimately it's very distressing, but we got to keep in mind that the Most High God is hearing our prayers and our cries, rather, you know what I mean? Our prayers for, help, you know what I mean? In this, this diabolical place, because this is the stuff we know about. All right. That's important to remember. Like right now, what is he doing right now? Like today, he doesn't sleep. You know what I mean? He can't sleep good unless he's oppressing somebody. So what is he doing right now? You know what I'm saying? For instance, let me get this video. Matter of fact, I'm gonna save this to the end because keep in mind things are still going on, right? And in York, Pennsylvania, which is a predominantly, I don't want to say predominantly so-called Black area, because there are Edomites that live there, but it's a lot. York, Pennsylvania has a lot of Black people that live there. You know what I'm saying? A lot of Jake lived there. So they sprayed Monday because there's mosquitoes. You gotta kill the mosquitoes. Scare you into the population. There's disease out there. So why are you spraying the Black population then? You know what I'm saying? And then last night, there was a huge fire in a warehouse. I don't know what was in the warehouse, but if I'm a guessing, man, it's something that could be asbestos and something that's been harmful in the air. That's why all of a sudden it went up and it was like a 6-alarm fire. So apparently they want York, Pennsylvania. Okay, but for now, let's see what happened in St. Louis, and keep in mind this is still happening today, so please don't be naive. All right. Oh, matter of fact, you bring that out, Isaiah 33, verse 1.
Con, this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 33 and verse 1. When everybody have it, please say Con.
Con. He ate something in his kitchen or not?
Well, what that was. Make sure you keep your phone on mute, y'all. Go ahead, King.
Verse 1. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee.
Anybody was bothering y'all? Y'all started this war, and by the power of Yahweh Shemel Shah, we're gonna finish it. All right. Now let's continue with the word, with the Slakia. Continue with the video. Slakia, also, like halfway in the video, when it's an important speech about to be taking place, all this music starts playing extremely loud. You read the comments, everybody's saying that, like, yo, why would you wait for this time to play this music that's extremely loud? So it's almost like it's redacted, even on YouTube. So, whoever did that knew what they were doing. Okay, so we'll skip over that part, but let's continue.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true.
I live in the area east of Fort Igor, about 5 or 6 blocks.
We all grew up pretty much around my grandmother's time, and we all were in that area, around the Clark Street, Garrison, in the Mill Creek area. I don't know how to say.
The metamorphosis of the Mill Creek area is only part of the story, only one facet in the overall master plan for the St. Louis of tomorrow.
Now, I didn't physically live in Pruitt-Igoe. I lived on Dayton Street, which was just across, in the back of the Pickle Factory, 905, in that area. But, the same experience was going on all over that area.
This is our city. Over 50% of St. Louis looks about like this. And unless something drastic is done, the entire city could resemble this as unkempt residential areas slowly slide downhill in a vicious circle. As the section slips gradually into blight, the higher income groups move out, leaving lower income families to take their places. The largest low-income group, racially, is the Negro. Generally unskilled because of economic pressures, the Negroes in 1950 numbered over 100,000 within the city limits, over 13% of the population. Today, there are many more Negroes in St. Louis, comprising a larger percentage of the population, and that is a decreasing population.
I was at home one evening and my daughter called me and asked me to look at Channel 4 News, that a lady was on it talking about experimentation in Pruitt-Igoe. Both me and my former wife, her mom, grew up in Pruitt-Igoe.
What I recall was that mostly at night, they would come through
trucks that would go down through the projects with a spray coming out, of mist coming out the back. And we were all told that it was spraying bugs.
Insects. That's what we were told. The sprayers would come through slowly, disseminate or spray this chemical down the street.
All the kids, we were behind the darn thing. Absolutely. You out the plan, nobody knew. Your people didn't know, the grown-ups didn't know.
They wouldn't have talked to me, I was a child at the time. But talking with some of my parents' friends, they remember being with these suits on, like germ warfare suits, protecting themselves on top of the buildings.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park.
Man with his newly discovered force has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. It came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded.
I've had acquaintances that has had illnesses, undiagnosed illness, but I never years earlier associated it with the testing.
Public health department staged demonstrations to convince the public of DDT's effectiveness and safety. Enthusiasm for the chemical knew no bounds, and few were questioning the wisdom of such use. Public places and private backyards were being treated whether people liked it or not.
I grew up in Pruitt-Igoe, Clark Square, downtown St. Louis, in the early 60s up until 1969. The boxes that we played on, I don't know what they were. I was fairly young.
We played everywhere. I mean, as kids, when we played in Pruitt-Igoe, they had a couple of parks. The Soto Park that had merry-go-rounds and swings, things of that nature.
These sprays, dust, and aerosols are now applied almost universally to farms, gardens, forests, and homes. Non-selective chemicals that have the power to kill every insect, the good and the bad, to still the song of birds and the leaping of fish in streams. All this, though the intended target may be only a few weeds or insects.
They had no concern about where they sprayed it. They would just come down the street. Kids were playing in the street. They continued to spray. It didn't matter to them.
A number of years ago, I worked with a woman when I was doing research professionally, and she came to me and said that she had
had an incident happen when she was a child where she had been on the playground at school and she had been sprayed by the military. And I thought it was, yeah, it wasn't like anything I'd ever heard before. She believed that her breast cancer was connected to this event and she wanted to know if I knew anything about it.
There was the dispersing of radioactivity in the air over cities and schools.
A week or so later, my neighbor came over and I didn't know her very well. I think we just moved in and she told me that she had had a very similar experience where she had been on the playground at school and it's been sprayed by the Army. And she believed that a brain tumor that she had had 10 years previously was connected to this open air study in St. Louis.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Initially, I was looking at chemical and biological weapons testing and development. I mean, it was very scant research out there, but virtually everything always classified it. I kept hitting a lot of dead ends until I picked up a book.
It's called The Plutonium Files, America's Secret Medical Experiment in the Cold War,
by Eileen Walson. As I read it, I found her talking about a man from St. Louis who was also the subject of my investigation connected to the St. Louis open air studies. And I realized that there were an awful lot of common parallels between what she was looking at, which was radiation injection studies, and what I was looking at, with a lot of the same players, a lot of the same people, including this man by the name of Louis Hempelman.
The telegram has to be decoded, but if you can read it, it's from Robert M. Fink, who was a doctor at the University of Rochester, and it's to Doctors Wright Langham and Lou Hempelman. So Langham and Hempelman were two experts on ionizing radiation and the body. And it's dated November 30th, 1945, 11/30/45. And it says HP3 and HP4 injected Tuesday, November 27th, HP5 injected Friday, November 30th. HP stands for human product.
Louis Hempelman, who was from St. Louis, who had, when he was at Washington University working on the cyclotron, he had been engaged in human subject testing with radioactive materials. I began to see that there were an awful lot of pieces that came together for me, where what I was looking at, the St. Louis open air studies, seemed much more aligned with radiation studies than with chemical biological studies.
The atmosphere was, we didn't have but a couple of politicians, Black politicians during that period.
Housing reformers pressed lawmakers to replace the slums with clean, modern housing, to re-energize the Depression-era housing program that had been stalled by the war. They found an unlikely ally in civic leaders and politicians who began to see the ring of slums as an eyesore that blighted the aging downtown area. Eager developers desired valuable inner-city land, while anxious business interests worried fearful consumers were being driven away by the slums.
The downtown interest just wanted the slums to go away. They didn't particularly care what happened to the people, but because they were wealthy and powerful, they were a very important part of the coalition that passed the 1949 Housing Act.
We had our alderman, but I don't, back then, I don't remember our alderman being as favorable or coming around to see about us as much as they are now.
To be able to tell you the secret of selling the Negro, we did a lot of digging. We talked to leading businessmen, the customers, and the salesmen. We went to Washington, D.C. We set up cameras and other key points around the nation. And out of this all, there emerged a story, the story of a new market. Yes, this is the market we're talking about, the new Negro family. Their name is Wells or Wilson, Smith or Brown or Alexander or Breen. They live in Chicago, in Atlanta or New York, in Detroit, St. Louis, Los Angeles, any one of 1,000 cities and towns.
The essence of public housing was that the public sector could do a better job. People who had been living where they literally never saw the sun, now they would have more magnificent views than the richest people in St. Louis.
My experience in Puerto Rico is it went from Camelot to Little Korea, as they called it. When my family first moved into Puerto Rico, I was 5 years old, I believe.
Outside one of the buildings in the mud, the slush, and the debris, we found this button, which looks a bit the worse for wear. It says, "Make Pruitt-Igoe #1." That undoubtedly reflects the feeling of many of the residents who live here.
Pruitt-Igoe wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. Even the people who lived in the building, they got along. We used to have, I remember that we used to have little activities outside to do for the kids, and we used to have meetings to think about what we're going to do for our buildings and different things like that. It was an okay place to live when it first started.
It was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. I remember my cousins, older cousins, coming home after touring the buildings with my mom, talking about heat was coming in through the radiators, because before that we had a stove that sat in the middle of our house that heated us.
All over the country, families such as this are enjoying new prosperity. They have new interests, new standards of living, a buying power they've never enjoyed before.
They had elevators. And Pruitt-Igoe was really clean. It was neat.
The truth of the matter is that the Negro lives pretty much the same as other folks. He buys pretty much the same way, too. But just the same, a lot of old doubts and opinions keep cropping up over and over again.
I don't like to do business with Negroes. They're drifters. You can't keep track of them.
Yes, although a lot of people think that way, the truth is that 1 out of every 3 Negro families living in cities today owns its own home.
There was a lot of involvement of the neighbors, and it stayed that way until about 1959, when there was a major tornado that hit around the Pruitt-Igoe area, up on Coleman Street, places like that. And it displaced a lot of people. So they used Pruitt-Igoe as emergency housing. At that time, they brought the people in. It's supposed to be a temporary situation, but, it stayed that way.
You have to be screened and go fill out applications, and they screened you. And, so what I'm saying, it's riffraff and everything. So what I mean by that, good and bad. So if they felt that you weren't up to par enough to live there, then you didn't get in, If you had something that would be harmful to the neighborhood, or you might cause problems or something like that, you didn't get in.
My mom and dad, the other residents that were down there with us early on, 1955, 1956, they went through a stringent application process to get into Pruitt-Igoe. So when you had this emergency come up, these people did not have to go through it. So they let a lot of people that probably would have normally let in into Pruitt-Igoe, and shortly after that was when the maintenance and stuff like that, the federal money started being cut to take care of the buildings. That's when we had the downfall and the upkeep of the Pruitt-Igoe.
Maybe so, but Negroes are poor credit risk.
Not more of a credit risk than any other group. Actually, the Negro homebuyer meets his payments faithfully, often more faithfully than other race groups in the same economic level. That's the information we got from people who ought to know, the National Association of Real Estate Boards.
Well, maybe, but I've always heard that Negroes buy shoddy, poor quality merchandise.
No, it's just the other way around. According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group.
Someone actually knows the Negro problem. The average white man meets a Negro at work when we're in an inferiority position. You hear a lot of Southerners say, well, the Negroes that I've been around, they say they want.
segregation. They don't want to move into our schools. Well, this is what I call taking the fifth. Jimmy Hoffa and all the big rulings can take the fifth. Then how come we can't take the fifth? We don't even take the first when we can't get the 14.
They start moving blacks in these housing developments during the 50s. And it was segregated, so everybody had to stay in the same location. All of the attorneys, the physicians, the teachers, we all stayed in the same neighborhood.
Mostly, speaking of the white community, my experience with them were basically they were shop owners. So there was not very much interaction as far as socially during that time.
As I began to get older, when we moved to Hart Square, I actually had experiences, with going downtown and, being chased home by white kids.
My aunt owned 2 clinics in the city of St. Louis. My father owned 2 bars, but he had been a sharecropper. They all came to St. Louis to do better, and they did do better. And so they had all these black schools that were named after black people. All those schools are gone now. Came in, took all the jobs out. Most of the blacks left. We went to black schools. All the teachers were black, and they loved us. And they wanted us to do well. Well, they shipped all these kids out to places like Chesterfield, and they gave all the money to the bus companies.
In America, they charge me more money for automobile insurance, and they will never admit that in the Negro neighborhood, they have poor lighting on the streets and bad streets and small streets and overcrowded conditions. So I have more cars per acre than white folks have, and that's why I got more accidents per acre than white folks have. But in here, as me and my brother was discussing today, they charge you more for license because they say you're a bad driver, and then turn around and 60% of the bus drivers is black.
Our neighborhoods are run down now because there's no money here. And so it's just a different mindset. And then drugs weren't that prevalent in our community when I was a kid growing up.
First of all, it's important to understand that there was a scientific animus, and it posited that Black people were very, very different from whites, medically and biologically. And this provided a rationale and underpinning not only for the institution of slavery. Slavery probably could not have persisted if there hadn't been this medical underpinning, but also for the use of Blacks in research. For example, it said that Blacks were less intelligent, subhuman, perhaps not even quite human, that they didn't experience pain, that they were immune to diseases like malaria and heat sickness that made it impossible for whites to work in the field.
But rats goes to bone, and they knew from rats how fast rats excrete plutonium. You don't want this stuff in your body for very long.
Produced glow-in-the-dark radium. This radium into diseases as a sort of a cure-all product, and it was marketed that way. US Radium wanted to capitalize on this product. They hired a lot of young immigrant women to work in their factory, and they produced glow-in-the-dark watch dials and clocks. And the young women would use paint that had fluorescing properties to paint the watch dials. And in doing so, they would use small paintbrushes to hand paint these watch dials. And they would do what was called tipping the paintbrush. So they would use their tongue and they would get a nice point on the paintbrush and paint that watch dial. And they were trained to do that.
Now they knew from rats that that plutonium in rats goes to bone, and they knew from rats how fast rats excrete plutonium. You don't want this stuff in your body for very long. It's what radiologists call an internal emitter. You don't want that. You especially don't want it in your lungs.
What happened was many of the young women and girls became sick after working there a very short period of time, and many of them died as a result. What was happening was that the young women were actually breathing radium dust. They found it throughout the factory. It was in the floorboards. It was just wafting through the air. There was a subsequent investigation. U.S. Radium denied any involvement in the deaths.
Not sue the federal government when they're trying to do things that's better in people. It's like you can sacrifice a few for the good of the whole.
In 1953, which was the same year that the first St. Louis open air study began, Congress indemnified all private contractors who were conducting military-related human subject study research. And this, in effect, released them from all liability involved in human subject testing.
Another fine example of military-civilian cooperation was shown during the Asian flu epidemic of 1957. Thanks to the Army's isolation and identification of the virus, the pharmaceutical industry was able to develop a disease-curbing vaccine promptly.
The species of immunity that the government has, which basically says we are the king. It's called sovereign immunity. It's a version of sovereign immunity. We are the king. We can do no wrong. And that immunity is particularly heightened in the area of national defense.
Stanford Research Institute was a spin-off entity from Stanford University, and the Army donated a facility to Stanford University, who rolled that over to Stanford Research Institute, and they engaged in contract work for the United States military. And SRI had many contracts with the United States military. Their head principal researcher was Philip Layton. There wasn't a distinct separation between the two entities. That was fairly clear, I think. Layton was the person who came to St. Louis and engaged and actually designed the St. Louis open air studies in the 1950s.
So a very interesting story about this document, signed by Charlie Wilson, who was called Engine Charlie. He was Eisenhower's Secretary of Defense. When he was being confirmed, he had just come from General Motors as the CEO of General Motors, and some congressmen were worried that, how could he, would the interests of General Motors conflict with the interests of the Pentagon? And he would say, what's good for General Motors is good for America.
Tonight is the second annual showing of all the General Motors products here since the war. So they used to do this before the war every year, and they had to stop it during the war. And this is the second annual General Motors show. And this is a little preview that we're going to do tonight to show you what there is to see when you come here to the Waldorf in New York during this week to see it. The president of General Motors himself, Mr. C.E. Wilson. Erwin, come on over here, will you, sir? It's good to see you tonight, sir.
Nice to see you.
And before we get a little bit farther, would you please tell me now, so the folks will know, just what are you doing here?
Well, this is a show of all our new cars. And we're showing to the public these new cars that are our effort to produce more and better things for more people.
Nuremberg versus the Army's Wilson Memorandum.
What I will cover now comprehends all the experiments charged as war crimes in paragraph 6 of the indictment.
Nuremberg and Wilson both involved looking at policies related to human subject testing.
It is crimes against humanity in paragraph 11. It covers also the murders committed for so-called anthropological purposes, which are charged as war crimes in paragraph 7, and as crimes against humanity in paragraph 12.
Nuremberg's requirements were more stringent than the Wilson Memorandum, which was an Army directive.
These were not people who a psychiatrist would diagnose as mentally ill. There's a kind of I think there's a notion that, like Joseph Mengele, who did his twin experiments, that he was a psychopath. Well, Joseph Mengele was an MD, PhD. He was an up-and-coming young medical researcher. He escaped to Argentina.
The official SS report on Mengele's activities at Auschwitz reads, he completed all the problems that were presented to him to the complete satisfaction of his superiors. He has shown himself to be in control of every situation. Over and above all this, he eagerly spent what little free time he had to further his education in anthropology by his work with and careful utilization of the scientific materials which were at his disposal as a result of his position.
Karl Brandt was one of Hitler's personal physicians. He was a surgeon by training. He was in charge before the war of the T4 program, which was the program that so-called euthanized people who were mentally ill or profoundly retarded. That program developed a gas called Zyklon B that was then used in the killing concentration camps. Grant, interestingly, when he was one of the 7 who was sentenced to die by hanging, and when Brandt was sentenced, he offered the courts an alternative to hanging him. He said, you know, why don't you, instead of wasting my body, why don't you use me in a lethal medical experiment? Interesting rationalization of kind of his role and the role of science, giving his life to science and so forth. The court decided they'd just hang him.
Before taking up these experiments one by one, let us look at them as a whole. Are they a heterogeneous list of horrors, or is there a common denominator for the whole group? A sort of rough pattern is apparent on the face of the indictment.
Interestingly, the Wilson memorandum left out a few significant portions of what Nuremberg had covered.
Experiments concerning high altitude, the effect of cold, and the potability of processed seawater have an obvious relation to aeronautical and naval combat and rescue problems.
These experiments included hypothermia. They also included, sponsored with Luftwaffe, actually high altitude explosive decompression experiments. So what happens to a pilot if he has to get out of his aircraft? What's the altitude that's a safe altitude? For that, they brought in a low pressure chamber from Berlin, brought it to Dachau concentration camp, and they put people in it and lowered the air pressure, the atmospheric pressure until their lungs exploded, basically, to see how far that would have to go. So these were some of the experiments, but what I'd like to point out, and what people aren't generally aware of, is that this was an experiment done for national security. This was a military-sponsored series of experiments. There are others as well.
According to the Wilson memo, researchers were not required to have any particular scientific background in order to engage in human subject studies.
A mustard gas and phosphorus for an experiment, as well as those relating to the healing value of sulfanilamide for wounds, can be related to air raid and battlefield medical problems.
This essentially opened up human subject studies to really anyone to conduct.
To some degree, the therapeutic pattern outlined above is undoubtedly a valid one and explains why the Wehrmacht, and especially the German Air Force, was interested in and participated in these experiments.
With the Wilson memorandum, the Army did not stipulate that injury must be avoided, whereas in Nuremberg, they did state that injury must be avoided.
Fanatically bent upon conquest and utterly ruthless as to the means or instruments used in achieving victory, and callous to the suffering of people whom they regarded as inferior, the German militarists were willing to gather whatever scientific fruit these experiments might yield.
What's really interesting about this trial, though, is that out of the trial came a 10-point code of ethics that the judges wrote as the third part of the.
As you see, this music comes out of nowhere, and you're not gonna be able to hear what this guy says for a minute. But as it says in the Nuremberg trials, look, voluntary consent of human subject is absolutely essential. So the Nazis were a lot more humane than the people that brought them to trial, the Americans, and the things that they've done to us. And somebody purposely put this music on so you can't hear anything. As you can see, you can't hear anything for a while. So we're gonna move further.
It's embedded studies. So an embedded match here in North America as to aerial observation in St. Louis. They were
Make sure you have your phone muted, y'all. Mute your phone.
in Minneapolis. As a result of the study in Minneapolis, many of the residents engaged appreciate that this study was being conducted in their community. And after the experience in Minneapolis, they decided that things would be a little bit different in St. Louis, and things were quite different in St. Louis. They were much less open. It was a much more secretive study.
When people investigated it, it was done under the guise of putting up smoke screens to protect against Russian bombers.
You are the target. Our president has told us that even against the most powerful defense, an aggressor in possession of an effective number of atomic bombs could cause hideous damage.
They had told the mayor's office in St. Louis that they were going to be conducting a study where they were going to spray a cloud of material to conceal the city from aerial observation. So that implies in itself a defensive study because they're concealing or protecting people beneath this so-called cloud. When you look, though, at other documents, what you see are certain terms that are used, such as target zone and target area. So St. Louis was chosen because of certain conditions, meteorological factors, building structures, access to a river, access to a labor pool or a university with a labor pool of students. When you look at other documentation that preceded the St. Louis open air study, you can see that the Army Chemical Corps was interested in conducting studies where they could use a North American city that was similar to a city in the Soviet Union, such as Moscow. So they were trying to find a city that was its closest match here in North America. Philip Layton was director of operations at Dugway Proving Ground. He was also a colonel in the Army Chemical Corps. Just prior to the St. Louis studies, they had conducted at least 14 open air studies at Dugway Proving Ground, and those 14 open air studies involved the spread of radiation in a cloud. I refer to them as embedded studies. So an embedded study is a study that is going on that's sort of concealed underneath another study. So another study might be very public, might be very well known, might even be approved of by local community members and local leaders. But embedded study is a study that is essentially attached to that study. And as a result of that, there are all kinds of studies that have occurred that are much more concealed and classified and secret.
Reports of these countless experiments and achievements are kept in the National Library of Medicine, formerly the Army Medical Library, and called America's greatest gift to medicine. In the area of human physical experimentation, Army doctors and scientists are primarily interested in the capacities of man himself. In test chambers, for example, endurance research is conducted on human volunteers to determine how long the average soldier can be expected to perform at peak efficiency under a wide variety of conditions. The result of these experiments with volunteers, who can drop out at any time, are put to use by military commanders to obtain the greatest utilization of troops who might have to fight on a fast-moving atomic battlefield.
Victims were the most vulnerable people in our society, the young, the disenfranchised, the poor, people of color, people who did not know enough to ask questions.
Very often one reads about the negative response of most African Americans to medical research, for example. And it's true. One of the more convincing studies said that about 85% of African Americans, cutting through all socioeconomic strata, expressed a profound distrust of medical research in the U.S.
St. Louis had been selected by the Army because...
And Salakia, also, when we looked at the Holmesburg experiment, the apology of the mayor, Channel 10 did a report on that, and it talked about what happened, the atrocities and everything. And at the end, the whole point of them bringing that topic up, at the end, they talked about, yeah, because now they're scared to get the C word shot. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, we got to do better to gain the trust of them so, you know, they can live, because most people that are dying are from their demographic and this, that, and the third. And now that we can go fast forward a couple years after that aired, and you see people that are having problems with their heart, blood clots, Bell palsy, so forth and so on. So even them bringing out the atrocities that were done, quote unquote, in the past, still they were using that as a catalyst to jumpstart more medical experiments, you know what I mean, done on us that obviously are you know, from hindsight you could see that it was very dangerous. And you still got it. People still got it, you know, the virus. They still passed it along to people. So all the things that they said weren't going to happen happened, and people's health was affected. Let's continue.
Because it represented what they called a densely populated slum district. And it was indicated in documents that the data from the St. Louis study would be compared to the data from the radioactive cloud studies. Many of the researchers involved in CBR research, and in particular radiological weapons research and development, were actually quite young. They were recent college graduates, and some were medical doctors. Hempelman was a physician. Some of them were scientists, such as physicists and chemists. Joseph Hamilton was probably one of the more interesting of the group. He was at the University of California, and he was involved in human subject injection studies. He was very careless after the cyclotron had run. He would run into the room and lean against it. It was very dangerous, and he would drink radioactive cocktail.
There was tremendous interest in radiation in those days. This is Joseph Hamilton on the left, famous Berkeley professor, who's one of the early experts on health physics, the effect of ionizing radiation in the body. He used to like to. He's got a volunteer drinking some water with that's ionized and a Geiger counter there. Hamilton liked to do this experiment in front of his class at Berkeley. He used to like to drink some of this stuff and then walk past the Geiger counter and make it pop. He died in his late 40s of cancer, so it's probably not a good experiment to do.
But he was pretty reckless, not only with himself, but also with his patients. And he was sort of known to do that. And he partnered with Robert Stone at MetLab.
There were some chemical casualties in World War II, but not among combatants. This is the harbor at Bari, Italy. Bari is down the Achilles tendon of the boot of Italy. We had invaded Italy. We're about halfway up that boot. We thought this harbor was safe. And one night in December 1943, the Germans bombed it, surprisingly. In that harbor was a ship, the USS John Harvey. It contained 1,100-pound mustard bombs. No one knew that agent was on that ship in that harbor, except a small group of Chemical Corps people who accompanied that shipment. The ship was hit. Those Chemical Corps people were all killed. There was a lot of mustard in water, and a lot of seamen from other ships got mustard poisoning from swimming in that water. A lot of civilians got injured by this smoke, and most of them fled town. And an accurate count of the number of casualties is unknown. There are a lot of casualties among the seamen. A lot of people were sick, a lot of people were dying, and of course the local medical personnel did not know what was wrong. They did not know what was causing this strange illness.
All over the world, nations have continued to develop these deadly and inexpensive weapons. Many hiding their stockpiles and publicly denying their existence.
There's a sociologist by the name of Fred Emil Katz. He's actually a Holocaust survivor. And he talks about how many of the military personnel involved in the Holocaust, how their motivations were related to what he calls a local moral universe. And that is a very closed world. They don't any longer have to answer to larger society. They only answer to each other.
Not only are you convinced of the moral justification, but you what I call your virility is emphasized by contribution to that system. your moral virility consists of your contribution to that morality, whether it's a gang a member or in a Nazi concentration camp. To become a great killer is a great contribution. That accounts for the seeming zealotry of people in contexts that are so unthinkable from a different context. Now, what makes it work is that the contexts are self-contained. So while you're a soldier in the army, you're not confronted by the civilian morality. If you were, you couldn't do it.
There were people in the military who understood, at least to some extent, just how bad this was, but they weren't that concerned about it because it was the enemy.
The enemy that day turned out to be American soldiers, led by Lieutenant William Callahan, frustrated in their search for enemy troops. The U.S. soldiers massacred literally hundreds of villagers, old men, women, children. These people were herded up, basically, and systematically murdered. Murdered, as far as I can tell.
And that's what you have to do, really, in order to take people's lives, including women and children who are not on the battlefield. You have to look at them as being subhuman.
These scientists, they live in a sense, in a science cocoon that has its own moral system.
Parsons Engineering, Stanford University, and although Monsanto got out of the lawsuit early on, there were indications that a facility that Monsanto had was actually, to some extent, involved in the operations locally in St. Louis.
In regard to Monsanto's role in the St. Louis open air studies, they were one of few entities that actually had been informed in advance about the study. Granite City Steel and Monsanto, both defense contractors, had been notified in advance. So they notified the mayor's office and they notified two defense contractors. I believe they also notified the Granite City Board of Aldermen for some reason, but they didn't notify the people of St. Louis who were going to be targeted by the spraying events. With the radiological studies, we saw that it was a very militarized structure, that many of the individuals who were scientists and physicians were also sworn into the military, and now they were working under a military command. And as a result of that, secrecy became paramount, and compartmentalization also became very important. Very little information was shared, and so they only had to meet the standards of other people who were working on radiological weapons. And therefore, anything went.
Some of these guys actually marched through Ground Zero a little later after the heat died down, and it was very common. Now, ask yourself this question: was this a human experiment? Well, a lot of the so-called atomic soldiers, as they call themselves, years later, the atomic veterans, they believe it was. This was not classified as a human experiment. This was not considered to be a human experiment. What was this considered to be in the 1950s? Exactly. It was a training exercise for the atomic battlefield of the future. The atomic battlefield of the future, this is about desensitization. This is not an experiment. So, since it wasn't an experiment, what rules do not apply? Secretary Wilson's memo, right? The consent rules don't apply. Not a human experiment.
There was also careerism, which is part of this as well, that they had their own personal objectives in terms of building a career and having sort of this unique pathway of research.
Slovakia. See, people look at horror movies like Friday 13th, Michael Myers, like these are the real villains. These are the real people looking cracking up probably how many people they've killed in their lifetime or will kill through cancer and other diseases. This is Esau. This is what he does. He hasn't changed. And to expect him to change is insanity. Let's continue.
Unique pathway of research. Then an awful lot of autonomy. So the question wouldn't have been, can I study this? Or can I go down this pathway of research? The question would have been, how can I go down this pathway of research? And that's a very different question.
Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the Army conducted a series of secret airborne tests to find the most effective way to spread bacteria over more than 250 populated areas, including San Francisco, St. Louis, and Minneapolis. Experts now estimate that millions of people were exposed without their knowledge or approval.
It's like, wait a minute. Who's to say it stopped 5 blocks from here?
Years later, my mother did die of cancer. We didn't associate it with that during that time. And then I found out that they were doing it in other areas. And they did it periodically. It wasn't just a one-time thing.
Pruitt-Igoe had a medical center. And I remember when they had a dental school or a dental portion of this clinic, and they were checking children's teeth. Little, babies, firstborn babies, their first teeth and stuff like that. And they saved a lot of them. Something in the air down there that caused a lot of problems in these children and their teeth.
Once classified documents confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
It's a cancer-producing drug. It's cancer-producing.
Cadmium was known since the mid-1800s to be hazardous and toxic to human health. Certainly by the 1930s and 1940s, there was a lot of medical literature out there that noted that cadmium was particularly toxic to humans, particularly so via inhalation.
The lung is the second major route of cadmium entry into the body, and it is the most effective route.
I will tell you that there are physicians and scientists who would say, I don't want my family exposed to that stuff.
It sticks around in our body for decades because our body has no efficient way to get rid of it and may contribute to a variety of illnesses, including heart disease, cancer, and diabetes.
First thing you better know is the lungs. Lungs. It causes obstructive lung disease. Obstructive lung disease, that's not cool. I like breathing.
Once absorbed, cadmium can cause significant adverse health defects throughout the body.
It's the metal. So what does it do to the kidney? All heavy metals cause ATN and tubular damage.
Cadmium can have direct and indirect effects on the musculoskeletal system.
And it also goes to the bones and causes calcium loss. Uh-oh.
Recent studies suggest cadmium exposure may produce adverse health effects at lower exposure levels than previously predicted, including increased risk of hormonal cancers.
And finally, it leads to cancer. So notice, lung disease, lung cancer. Lung disease, lung cancer, that's cadmium.
Most recently, data suggests cadmium exposure may impair cognitive performance even at levels once thought to be safe.
If the Army didn't know that it was hazardous to human health, they should have known. And in particular, Leighton should have known because he was a chemist and he should have known what the effects of cadmium would have been.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
St. Louis data was very lacking, and they noted this in the study that there were portions that data was illegible, it was missing, it was redacted, it was just not there. And as a result of this, their findings are not really solid related to St. Louis. They did issue some findings, they issued a report.
This report I received today is a monumental document in more ways than one.
But if you look, there are 2 pages where they list all of the problems with the St. Louis data and that they clearly didn't have access to all of it. They just had a blanket denial. They had sprayed a harmless simulant was the term that they had used. When they noted that it was a harmless simulant, what that actually means, in fact, there have been simulant studies, like, for example, fallout simulant studies that measure the movement of radioactive fallout or to simulate movement of radioactive particles from a detonation, for example, from an atomic bomb. the simulation studies actually use radioactive materials. So even though it says a simulant, the simulant itself can be radioactive. And that's the case in many of these studies that were open air radiation studies.
These are two letters. I'm just going to show you the second one from the Atomic Energy Commission in 1947, as you can see, to physician contractors who are working with radioisotopes, radiation. The Atomic Energy Commission inherited all of the contracts and well, not most of the contracts and responsibilities of the Manhattan Project. Now, if you're a lawyer for the Atomic Energy Commission, the USAEC, after the war, and you find out about these secret plutonium injections, do you think that you would advise your client, the US government, to go public with this? No. They decided, these plutonium injections are very embarrassing. It could look bad for the government to have injected its own people with plutonium without their permission. There are these trials going on, these Nazi doctor trials going on at the same time as we're looking at these records. We definitely don't want to be associated with that. So they decided not to release that information. We only learned about this in the early 90s.
They didn't care about those little kids when they were out doing that, because if they did, they would have said, okay, no, we're not going to do this in this neighborhood with these little kids. I got all this protective gear. It's not going to hurt me, but it's going to hurt these little children.
It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you.
Isn't it like terrorism? When you stop and think about it.
Yeah. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
You swear in to protect the nation between terrorists, domestic and foreign.
I would say if I went to 10 funerals from people from Pruitt-Igoe area, 9 with cancer. So there was a high rate of cancer deaths in Pruitt-Igoe. And after my mom died and I had my surgery, I started thinking.
When we moved to Carr Square was a little different. Pruitt-Igoe was high rise, Carr Square was low rise. As a kid, I was very adventurous. One day I was playing out in front of my house, and the way that Carr Square is designed is each unit has yards, and the yard, the fencing around the yards were these steel poles that stuck up out of the ground. They had wiring around, and I was playing. I fell on one, and I injured my stomach. So when my mom and dad took me to the hospital, and they treated me, and as I'll say about 6 months later, this mass started to grow. My mom didn't know what it was. My dad didn't know what it was. Pretty much when I went to the hospital, they explained that it was a keloid.
Everyone that knows you in your life thinks the world of you. And yet I know you mentioned going through a period where you thought about suicide. You didn't want to leave the house. What has overall been the hardest part with this?
The most difficult part is dealing with people.
Because there was times that he used to sit in the room and he wouldn't cry, but he wouldn't come out, and I prayed about it and asked the Lord to give him strength. And he shines.
The studies indicate that there are potential health consequences, and that further studies should be done as to what the consequences were with respect to this particular population.
By the late 1960s, the United States had built a massive arsenal of chemical and biological weapons. But opposition to the program was beginning to grow in the Senate, prompted by military policies in Vietnam. The Pentagon had given the order to use herbicides and a tear gas called CS to drive the enemy out of their tunnels and ground fortifications.
It impacts us in different ways because when they manufactured the Agent Orange, the chemical, which dioxin is what is the agent in it that's the poison. And people might not know this, but there's sites around the country that are contaminated because these were sites that maybe they were using to manufacture it, or is when they put it on ships or airplanes, or, when they transported it. So we have hot spots even here in the United States.
After years of denial, the U.S. Army has confirmed that dangerous radioactive pollution is present in St. Louis County in Missouri. In the 1940s, the Manhattan Project produced the first nuclear weapons that were later to be dropped on Japan. Tons of nuclear waste from those experiments were buried in a creek near St. Louis.
As the use of radioactive materials increases, the problems associated with the disposal of the waste become ever more important. Of all known toxic materials, radioactive nuclides alone cannot be detoxified or rendered harmless by any known chemical or physical process. Safe disposal of these materials requires that they be so segregated that any return to man is in such a low concentration as to be certainly harmless. All manner of possible return paths must be considered in choosing a processing and disposal method.
The young families buying their homes knew nothing of the radioactive material in the area and that it had migrated off-site, contaminating the land in the area, as well as Coldwater Creek, which runs into the Missouri River and from there to the Mississippi, source of drinking water for St. Louis and all communities downstream.
They didn't use any discretion. They didn't have no concern about the health of anyone. They were just, I assume, doing their job.
I was born in 1949. A lot of this stuff was happening in the 50s and early 60s. I know it hurt a lot of people, including some of my family members and close friends.
It's just sad to think that you can come in a person's neighborhood and do whatever you want to do. And I keep saying that, but it was because of the color of our skin. It really was.
African Americans were disproportionately affected in the St. Louis open air studies. There were two target areas, actually. One was called the HOW area. The other was called the ITEM area. The HOW area was the area that they really focused on, a densely populated slum area. The ITEM area was more of an industrial zone adjacent to the Mississippi River, in fact. The census data related to the two areas that had been targeted by the military, average of about 73% African American population, closer to 80%, actually 79% in the HOW area, which was their main target zone. I believe that they selected a community that they believed was relatively powerless and had a lack of resources in the community.
In 1969, 14 million pounds of these chemicals were sprayed over Vietnam. The United States military defended its use of gas by claiming that CS was not really a lethal agent, even though in concentrated doses it could cause death. In 1969, the United Nations passed a resolution condemning the use of both herbicides and CS. Some members of Congress followed suit by threatening major cuts in funds for chemical and biological weapons. In response, President Nixon convened a scientific panel to review U.S. policy. It was apparent to the panel that as a weapon of mass destruction, biological weapons were within the grasp of any third world nation interested in having them.
It also recognized that by retaining biological weapons, we legitimize them in a way. Our offensive program with biological weapons suggested to other nations that these were useful weapons and that they were worth pursuing.
I guess the lesson is, although I believe in progress, we're getting better and better at creating new and more clever ways to hurt each other. But we do live in a dangerous world. I think we are going to continue to do this kind of work to see how scientific discoveries to benefit people could also be used to hurt people, and how we have to protect ourselves against those who would mean us harm. You don't have to call them human experiments sometimes to get the information that you want. You call them field tests.
President Truman effectively blurred the line between the military and other public agencies, including public health agencies, such as the United States Public Health Service. At the time that the Public Health Service was engaging in the 1963 to 1965 open air study in St. Louis, they were also engaged in the Tuskegee syphilis study in Alabama. They were partnered with the United States Public Health Service, who by now, along with the National Institutes of Health, had been engaged in military studies that were effectively concealed because they were a health agency, and most people wouldn't view them as an agency that was conducting military studies. So the Public Health Service partnered with the Army Chemical Corps, and they used shared equipment as the Public Health Service was releasing material into the environment. The Army Chemical Corps was measuring radioactive particles in the air. I made arrangements to visit Stanford University because I wanted to look at Philip Layton's personal collection of papers. And they had them there in their archives, and they were open to the public. And I looked through a number of boxes of documents, and I saw some information that seemed to me to be very relevant to the St. Louis studies. I saw some documentation in his own hand related to some Department of Defense studies. And I spent about half a day looking through boxes and seeing some very interesting documents, some of which mentioned St. Louis, and put in a copy order for well over 100 separate distinct documents. And the next morning when I arrived, I was told that Stanford's general counsel had closed the collection to the public. And I tried to make an appeal. I stated I had traveled here from St. Louis and I'd made arrangements in advance, and can you keep it open for an additional day? And they said no, and it is closed until general counsel decides otherwise. And I received my marching orders was the term that was used.
This is the puzzle here. One of the puzzles here. What if you decide that, and we've kind of had this in the interrogation debate. What if you decide that you have to do something that is contrary to the rules, but it's absolutely crucial for the national interest, so you're going to do that in a classified domain, right? It happens, and this I think is really interesting. The federal rules require that even classified human experiments, secret experiments, be approved by an ethics committee. Right? So the CIA has a research ethics board.
I want to just let you know, I am so behind you. And I know maybe sometimes you haven't gotten the backing that you've wanted, and you're going to get so much backing. Maybe you're going to say, please don't give us so much backing.
That's okay. That's pretty cool. And by the way, the rules also say that if you're in that secret experiment that the CIA is doing, if there were such a thing, that you would have to give informed consent. So what does that mean? It means that you have to have the appropriate security clearance as a human subject to get the information you need to give your informed consent. And it means if you're on the research ethics board, that you also have to have the secret clearances you need to get the information to judge whether that's acceptable. But here's the rub. This is why I think secret experiments could never be ethical. What if you dissent? You know, you're the newly minted young philosopher ethicist. You're the only one who objects. It's classified. What do? Right? If you go to the newspapers, you're sunk, right? You're going to Guantanamo. Okay? So this is a real problem. It's largely unresolved. But I think as long as there's no transparency, it's hard to argue that you can do that ethically, because the minority, the dissenters, couldn't get their day in court.
For them not to allow you to go forward with it, to me, that's an omission of guilt, because if it plays out in the courtroom, they're gonna lose.
Yeah.
I would never get anything out of this, but I have children.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's affected my
Exactly.
kids. Their mom lived there, I lived there. Mm-hmm. We plant a seed. Who said that seed's not gonna hail?
Absolutely.
If the research is saying what the long-term effects could be or are, then these folks, I think, I'm sure they understand it and should be brought to bear their guilt.
There's a lot to be learned from this and many other things that were happening during the Cold War related to CBR testing, particularly radiological testing. What else were the participants engaging in terms of military activity?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
We always have to consider context and not just a study at face value. We have to make sure that we truly have independence in academia and that it's not subverted to military objectives or to corporate objectives, and that we're truly able to engage in public scholarship and to look towards the community in terms of service to community. Dwight Eisenhower had urged caution and a vigilant citizenry. He was the head of both the military structure as commander in chief and the political structure as president, and yet he too almost seemed to feel powerless.
100,000 people or better were used as guinea pigs. The federal government knew about it, and some of the other major corporations knew about it. It's like you can sacrifice a few for the good of the whole. And that happens a lot with African Americans.
Negroes is like a bunch of crabs in a pot of hot water. Once one get to the top, the others pull it down. So that's not the crabs, that's the hot water.
Highly corrosive river water flowed through the city's lead pipes, leaching lead and other dangerous metals into the water supply. And what came out of the tap in many homes was toxic.
The bottom line here is who decides what counts as what fits in what box in a bureaucracy is a very important question.
Human rights can be subverted at any turn.
Right now, today, I'm 55 years old. Right now, today, it's still a weird thing to me. It's like unexplainable.
I think I'm 4 years out now from this research initially going public, but I hear weekly from individuals who have been impacted directly and who have lost family members, and they believe that it is connected to the open air studies in St. Louis.
You see, the flag is drenched with our blood. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us. This country is desperately sick, and man is on the critical list.
Like that in New Haven, sick and tired, been sick and tired.
All right. So, it's the reality. That's the reality of what has happened. And now I'm going to show you a reality of what continues to happen. And they actually put it in your face like, this is a good thing. Okay. This helicopter to spray thick brown liquid over central Pennsylvania communities. York, Pennsylvania. A helicopter will be flying across Pennsylvania communities, plural, on Monday, conducting spraying for flies. Because, of course, that's the biggest problem we have is these flies, Hope you picked up my sarcasm. The York County Office of Emergency Management says Helicopter Applicators Incorporated, whoever that is, will dispersing vector tab 12 AES's bacterial larvicide for black fly gnat suppression. Because the black gnat is the black fly. That's what they're kind of telling you what it's all about. Like, yeah, it's for you black gnats. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a vector back 12 AS is not a chemical and is a thick brown liquid resembling chocolate milk. Who wrote this? Do you know what I'm saying? It's not a chemical. Don't worry about it. It's not a chemical. It just kills things. And you know what? It's like it might as well be chocolate milk. We're just spraying you guys with chocolate milk. Oh my goodness. And that's why it says history will repeat itself. If we don't know our history, of course, this is not taught in any school, any college that I know of, you know what I'm saying? But, if you don't learn about these things, then, history will repeat itself and people will want it. Like, oh yeah, I can't stand these gnats. Yeah, these black gnats. We need some chocolate milk to stop these black gnats. This is something written for a kindergartner. All right. The Office of Emergency Management System says blah blah blah. Vectorbac 12AS is a BTI product, which stands for bacillus. I can't even. Please don't give me the line. If you can pronounce it, you go right ahead. And is the only product used in Pennsylvania waterways for black fly suppression. You may see the helicopter in areas including York, near creeks, and a tail number N651 HA. Looks like kind of like nigga ha, like with a laughter. You know what I mean? Nigga, nigga. It will be flowing near treetops and releasing the vector back into predetermined locations on creeks. Spraying begins at 7 a.m. Monday. Let me see. Also, what else could we? Slovakia. Here we go. What else is happening in York? Let's see what the population of York, the demographics. So Slovakia. Just give me a minute. I would like to see. So I know the population of 44,000, right? We go to Wikipedia. So it's not like a town. It's like pretty much a city. 44,000 is pretty populous. 10th most populous city in Pennsylvania. City of York. Let's see the demographics, because apparently York is the only one that has a problem with this. York is 38% Hispanic and 23% were non-Hispanic Black. I don't even know what that means. I'm guessing that's Black, and 23% white. So from almost 40% Hispanic and 23%, that's like what, 60%, give or take? What else? Oh, okay, hold on, Salaki. That was a consensus in 2020. All right, so it was about 30% so-called African American in 2010. See how things are dropping? Wow, 51% Edomite and 28% of the population were Hispanics. So the Hispanics are growing. So-called Negro population is contracting. And what's going on now? Apparently a 6-alarm fire in York, Pennsylvania. Still smoldering a day later. They said construction. The smoke coming. I seen smoke coming from my house where I live in West York. There was a lot of construction things in there. It was huge. They said it's the biggest fire they had in decades. So either, they were continuing to spray through burning of chemicals, like they showed in the other video we just watched, or they were just, or like they wanted to take the project, so they, killed everybody in there and then demolished the building. Here they set a fire, and I'm sure they want this land. Okay. So that is what's happening in our world today. That's why we had to keep the law, statutes, commandments, follow the Most High. Let's get 2 Corinthians 2:11. Read, be blessed, read, be aware, never stopped. It hasn't stopped. They're spraying chocolate milk on the people, and it's not even a chemical. It's just chocolate milk. You know, it helps kill the black gnats, the black insects. You know what I mean? And that's why Esau communicates a lot through his media, his television, his shows, his movies. And that's just communication. This is what we're doing. Make sure you stay in the house. You black gnats, you can go all around and play outside during this time period and start Monday. So before you even get out of bed good, you know what I mean? This will be all up in the air. And it's just chocolate milk. Don't worry about it. Okay. But you Edomites, wink, wink, you guys stay in the house. All right, let's bring that out. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11.
John, this is the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11. Everybody have it. Please say Khan.
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 Khan, verse 11. Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices.
Yeah, we know what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? Just don't. We just cannot be naive. Like, you know what? They changed. You know, they you know what? I know some guy at work, and he's a nice guy, and he said, you know what? He's gonna he feels sorry for what his people did. And that's the thing. The liberals will cry you to death and Black Lives Matter and this, that, and the third. Oh, that was a long time ago, though. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't happen anymore now, you know. So they're really not caring because they're the ones that are moving into your neighborhoods and gentrifying your neighborhoods. And they'll tell you in a heartbeat, Black Lives Matter until your whole neighborhood, there's not a Black life seen for miles. And they have no problem with that to continue to live their life and then, you know, move on to the next one. Okay. So let's just not be naive. We're not ignorant of his devices. This is what they do. This is what they have been doing. This is what they'll continue to do. It's not stopping. And you know, now that we're getting closer and closer to World War III, you know, we're going to be impacted a lot more, you know, than we could ever imagine. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. Be ready. Be, you know, be vigilant. Be sober. Your adversary, the devil, is a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Okay. All right. So we're going to end in prayer. So if everybody would like to stand and face the east or prostrate and face the east, and we can get started. After we pray, stay on for announcements. Everybody on the Zoom. This is the Lord's Prayer in Paleo Hebrew, Abanawa, Shabbat Shemayim, Kodash, Haya, Shemka, Yahweh, Malachwaka, Daba'a, Ratazayaka, Haya, Aisha, Barataza, Kawa, Haya, Bashamayim, Natananawa, Lacham, Tau, Yuwam, Wasalafnawa, Kabawafnawa, Kasalafnawa, Kabawafinawa, Wala'a, Dabeinawa, Banasai one, Abal, Hawashainawa, Mayan, Rai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwaf, Wa'ala, Wataparaf, Lai Walumnum, this is the book of Matthew, chapter 6, and verse 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Shema Yasharallah Yahweh Allah Hayanawa Yahweh Aha Shema Yasharallah Yahweh Allah Hayanawa Yahweh Aha Shema Yasharallah Yahweh Allah Hayanawa Yahweh Aha Shema Yasharallah Yahweh Allah Hayanawa Yahweh Aha. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, our power, Yahweh is one. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. Creole of Israel. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hom Yashala. All right, I pray this lesson was edifying and that you received something from it, learned some things. If you learned one thing, as the elder always says, we've done our jobs. All right. So keep going, follow these law, statutes, commandments to have protection in these last days from these diabolical Edomites, as you can see. And this is just a few of things that they've done. But you know, follow these law, statutes, commandments to get some edification. I mean, it's like get some protection